Chapter 21-25. However, before she could say anything, her lips, tongue, and breathing had already been completely invaded by the other party. Gu Xingyin clearly knew that she had no way to resist this man. Just like how the other party desired her, she also had an extremely deep desire for him. White smoke rose in spirals from the green jade incense burner, brushing past the trembling curtains, imprinting faintly on the brocade quilt, and finally dissipating in the sweet air. It was rather quiet in the sleeping chamber, and no one dared to disturb her. Gu Xingyin's glued eyelids trembled a few times, and finally opened unwillingly, looking at the exquisite embroidery on the gauze canopy inside the large bed in the sleeping chamber. Her body was unusually sore, and there was a kind of exhaustion as if all the energy in her body had been emptied. Thinking of the nonsense these days, even though Gu Xingyin and Ji Yu had been together for so many years, her face still blushed. It was too absurd. A warm force came from her waist, and behind her was a man's possessive embrace. Gu Xingyin didn't like this position, so she lazily turned around. The two of them were facing each other, and then, she met Ji Yu's smiling eyes. "You're awake?" Gu Xingyin grunted, and couldn't help but reach out a hand to wrap around Ji Yu's body, sending herself into his embrace. Ji Yu enjoyed his lover's intimacy and dependence on him very much. He looked at Gu Xingyin's slightly closed eyes and the tiredness that was difficult to hide, and knew that his lack of self-control had tired her out. He lowered his head, and gently kissed her eyelids. "Sleep a little more?" Her lover's embrace was too comfortable, and this kiss was too gentle. Gu Xingyin almost didn't resist, and instantly sank into a dark and sweet dreamland. When she woke up again, it was already the next day. Fortunately, her symbolic meaning as the Demon Emperor was greater than her actual meaning, so she didn't need to do everything herself. Otherwise, He Qianglou would probably have to bear the title of the Demon Emperor of the Calamity Clan. Time passed very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, Ji Yu and Gu Xingyin had already lived in the Demon Emperor Mountain for several years. On this day, Ji Yu, who was eating with Gu Xingyin, suddenly had a change in expression. Gu Xingyin heard the sound transmission that there was something going on in the small world, and he had to go back. Gu Xingyin looked at his expression. Ji Yu understood her meaning, and shook his head. "It's no big deal, I can do it alone. You stay here." Since he said so, Gu Xingyin naturally believed him and did not say anything else. To the outside world, Gu Xingyin announced that the Demon Lord had sensed something and was going into seclusion for a period of time. The days didn't seem to be any different from before. However, on this day, just as Gu Xingyin was about to take a bath and change his clothes, his expression suddenly froze. The one who came in with a tray wasn't one of the maids who usually served her. The man who came in was wearing a snow-white undergarment, and he didn't wear any shoes. The long hair that fell to his waist was only loosely tied up with a silver-white ribbon. Looking at his appearance carefully, it was actually a rare and elegant handsome face. His peach blossom eyes were clear and cold, and he was a rare handsome gentleman. Gu Xingyin frowned. She said coldly, "Where are Qi Ji and Bai Ji?" These were the names of the two maids in her palace. The man smiled gently, and came forward with the tray. He said softly, "How can the two sisters compare to you Lu's understanding?" Chapter 21-26. Before he could finish speaking, his entire body was suddenly hit by a huge force, and he flew out, crashing heavily onto the ground. "Your Majesty." The man who called himself Yulu raised his pale face, and looked at Gu Xingyin in disbelief. Gu Xingyin looked at him with killing intent. Are you qualified to be called Yulu?" How could she not see this man's purpose? He probably heard the news of Ji Yu's closed-door cultivation, and came to climb her bed. Seeing Gu Xingyin's appearance, the man did not give up, and only looked at her in a daze. "Your Majesty, Yulu knows that my status is low, and I don't dare to fight with the Demon Lord. I only ask." When he said this, a trace of red appeared on his pale face, and that cold face seemed to be dyed with a touch of beauty. "I only ask that your Majesty can see Yulu's sincerity, and allow Yulu to stay by your side." Logically speaking, if such a beauty was really the previous empress of a white marriage, even if she could see that this person was deliberately seducing her, she would still gladly accept him. In any case, it was just an extra toy. But the person who had taken over this body was Gu Xingyin. She only looked coldly at the man on the ground, as if she saw something dirty. Are you worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as the demon lord? Yu Lu's eyes widened. He was only an ordinary member of the tens of thousands of demons in the Demon Emperor Mountain. His bloodline was not noble, and he did not have an outstanding family background. The only thing he could take out was his face. He had heard countless times that the Demon Emperor and the Demon Lord had a deep relationship, and that the Demon Emperor had even kept himself pure for the Demon Lord, and had never touched anyone else. Yu Lu had once seen the Demon Lord from afar, and only felt that he and the Demon Lord were somewhat similar in terms of temperament and appearance. Some unspeakable delusions arose just like this. This time, he finally heard that the Demon Lord was in closed-door cultivation, and the Demon Emperor had already stayed alone in the Demon Emperor Palace for several days. He knew a little about the habits of the heaven-devouring python's bloodline. He purposely dressed himself up so that he looked more similar to the Demon Monarch. He firmly believed that under such circumstances, the Demon Monarch would definitely not reject such a handsome demon who looked similar to the Demon Monarch if he volunteered to sleep with the Demon Monarch. He had planned for several days, and even paid with his own body to the Demon Clan guard captain of the Demon King's palace, so that he would let him pass. At a certain point in time, he had sent away a few of the Demon King's Majesty's personal maids, and successfully sneaked into the Demon King's palace that he had never entered before. However, no matter how much he thought about it, what he didn't expect was that he had already prepared everything and had already successfully infiltrated. Yet, His Majesty the Demon Emperor looked down on him. Such a Demon Emperor was quite different from the heaven-devouring python in the legends. He stared blankly at Gu Xingyin's alluring face and was somewhat puzzled. But he didn't have the chance to figure it out. A sharp pain came from his dantian. His Yao core. Get over here. Gu Xingyin's thoughts moved, and the violent anger had already reached the ears of the demons near the Demon King's palace. The palace guard captain and a few maids ran in shock, and knelt down in front of the Demon Emperor's rage. Seeing the man in white lying on the ground, their faces all turned pale. Gu Xingyin didn't even look at them, and only said, Bai Ji and Qi Ji left their posts without permission. Guard captain, had an affair with an outsider. Each of you go to the punishment hall to receive your punishment. Hearing the two words, punishment hall, their faces were already pale, but they didn't dare to say anything. They just lowered their heads and dragged the body on the ground out. Chapter 21-27. Gu Xingyin watched them leave coldly. When they reached the punishment hall, someone would naturally make them speak and tell the truth about what they had done and what they had overlooked. Ever since she had taken over this body, she had never lost her temper before. But now, she had to show all the demons that the Biyao Demon King had not changed her mind. She had not lost her temper only because she had not encountered anything that could infuriate her. And what this demon called Yu Lu had done today had clearly crossed her bottom line. Even though this was not her real body, Gu Xingyin was not willing to let her lover suffer any grievances. She wanted everyone to know that Demon Lord He Qianglu was the Demon King's reverse scale, and anyone who touched it would die. The Demon King's palace had a new guard captain, and the Demon King's personal maidservants had rested for half a month before returning to the palace. It was just that they had become even more cautious. The previous peaceful days had made them let down their guard. Now that they had learned their lesson, they naturally did not dare to make any mistakes. And this time, His Majesty the Demon King's closed-door cultivation had made all the demons realize the importance of His Majesty the Demon King. Given the nature of the heaven-devouring python's bloodline, His Majesty the Demon King had not summoned any demons during the 2 years that His Majesty the Demon King had been in closed-door cultivation. It could be said to be a very inconceivable thing. After all, it was the nature of the Snake Clan. Once they had sex, the bloodline power would surge continuously in their bodies. Abstaining from sex for 2 years was an extremely torturous punishment. But His Majesty the Demon King had done it. From then on, those demons who harbored some inexplicable thoughts about the Demon King had completely given up. No demon dared to belittle His Majesty the Demon King ever again. Actually, these demons had thought too much. The heaven-devouring python's bloodline was not bad, and the average member had no way of suppressing it. To control it, one had to rely on strong willpower. But Gu Xingyin was not like that. Her strength was strong enough to suppress the impulses in this body, and it was not as unbearable as the rumors said. The joy between her and her lover was completely based on lust. How could someone as powerful as Ji Yu and Gu Xingyin allow themselves to be controlled by mere physical desires? Gu Xingyin had also heard some of the rumors that were going around today. However, she did not stop it, nor did she clarify it. This kind of rumor would not affect him at all. Instead, it would make the demons fear the demon lord even more. Since that's the case, let them be. Gu Xingyin, who was meditating cross-legged in the main hall, suddenly had a change of expression. Before she opened her eyes, she felt herself falling into a familiar and warm embrace. Is it over? She relaxed in his arms and opened her eyes to look at the man she hadn't seen for a long time. Sorry to keep you waiting. Ji Yu felt somewhat guilty. To him, it was just a trip back to the small world to retrieve some things, and it took less than the time to brew a cup of tea. But to this world, it was probably 1 or 2 years. Let me show you something. He smiled and pulled Gu Xingyin up. He raised his hand and set up a boundary. The purpose of this boundary was not to prevent others from spying on them, but to sense the laws of this world. Ji Yu smiled and stretched out his hand. A white lotus flower bloomed in his palm. Chapter 21-28. Gu Xingyin stared at it with rapt attention. The white jade lotus bloomed slowly until it reached its most perfect state. Then, tiny spots of light came out from the center of the blooming petals bit by bit. Those tiny spots of light seemed to want to leave, but were bound by something invisible to a small area of 1 inch above the white jade lotus. Slowly, those tiny spots of light became more and more numerous, and gradually gathered together to form a small bead that shone like a white star. The bead floated above the white jade lotus as it slowly rotated. As it slowly took shape, the perfect white jade lotus in Ji Yu's palm also gradually withered and withered. In the end, it turned into a wisp of smoke and disappeared into thin air. Ji Yu withdrew his hand, and the small bead fell into his palm. He took Gu Xingyin's hand and put the small bead into her palm. What is this? Gu Xingyin asked curiously. The small white bead in her palm was slightly cold to the touch. When she held it in her palm, there seemed to be a steady stream of gentle power that seeped into her body. It was so comfortable that the tens of thousands of spiritual cavities in her body could not help but stretch out. Ji Yu looked at her with a smile. This is a primordial treasure formed by the essence of tens of thousands of primordial lotus seats in our small chaotic world, the lotus heart. The small chaotic world was the name he gave to the small world he was born in. Since it was born out of chaos, there were still wisps of chaos energy left in that small world even now. He had sensed that the lotus heart was about to take shape, so he specially returned to the small chaotic world. Hearing his words, Gu Xingyin instantly understood that this was a very rare treasure. The tens of thousands of lotus seats in the small chaotic world were not ordinary lotuses. That day in her dream, she saw clearly that after Ji Yu's original body, the chaotic green lotus, was born in the chaos, the remaining chaotic chi entered the newly born world, and then gave birth to everything in the world. After the birth of the chaotic green lotus, the remaining gray chi and the spiritual chi emitted by the chaotic green lotus fell into other places in the small chaotic world, and formed tens of thousands of lotus seats. It could be said that the lotuses in the small chaotic world were all derivatives of the chaotic green lotus. In terms of preciousness, each lotus could be regarded as a top primordial spiritual treasure in the untainted land. The heart of the lotus was formed from the essence of tens of thousands of connate numinous treasures. It was a unique connate cardinal treasure. Ji Yu looked at her lover gently. Strictly speaking, your original body is also a lotus. It will be good for you to carry this with you. As for himself, this lotus core might be precious to others, but it was of little value to him. In terms of strength alone, Ji was already an undying existence that surpassed the heaven Tao. Needless to say, the Chaos Lotus was the most powerful chaos treasure in the world. Gu Xingyi knew what he meant and didn't argue with him. With a flash of light in her hand, the bead was wrapped around her neck by a thin silver thread. "Am I pretty?" She looked up at her lover with a smile. Jiyu gently hugged her body. "My Ah-in, no matter what, you are the most beautiful." His Majesty the Demon Lord had come out of seclusion. That was not the main point. The main point was that His Majesty, the Demon Lord, was said to have gained great enlightenment in his seclusion, and his strength suddenly increased dramatically. And the most important thing after he came out of seclusion, besides accompanying the Demon Lord, was to issue a challenge to the various experts of the demon race. Chapter 21-29. No one could figure out what the Demon Lord meant by this. But Gu Xingyi knew. She knew that this man was angry. Even if she didn't say it, and the servants didn't dare to say it, as long as Jiyu wanted to know what happened in this world, there was nothing that he couldn't know. Of course, Jiyu knew why, when he and Ah-in showed such a good relationship, there would still be people who dared to try to get between the two of them when he wasn't around. The reason was very simple, that was, the only one these demons truly respected was their demon emperor. And for him, the Demon Lord, all their respect was based on the fact that the demon emperor liked him. When Jiyu returned to this small world and found out what had happened, he found it funny. He wasn't angry at Gu Xingyi, or even at others, but he felt that he had to let this person from the Demon Emperor Mountain open his eyes wide and take a good look. He, Jiyu, was not a pitiful person who had to rely on his lover to gain the respect of others. Only Gu Xingyi saw through Jiyu's intentions. She saw through it and didn't stop him. Whatever her lover liked to do, as long as it didn't affect anything important, she would let him do it. Thus, the members of the demon clan were stunned. Starting from the slightly weaker demon clan, Jiyu issued a challenge almost every day. However, the demons couldn't refuse. Firstly, Jiyu's words were very polite. He had always been curious about the spells and cultivation methods of the demon clan and wanted to spar with everyone. Secondly, Jiyu's identity was the Demon Lord of the demon clan after all, and the demons didn't dare to casually reject him. Especially when the Demon Lord caused such a big commotion, but there was no reaction from the Demon Emperor Palace. What did this mean? It meant that the Demon Lord's actions, at least the Demon Emperor agreed. Since His Majesty the Demon Emperor didn't mind, they could only play along with His Majesty the Demon Monarch. This was what the demons thought at the beginning. In their eyes, no matter how talented He Qianglu was, he only had a few decades of cultivation. How powerful could he be? However, reality quickly gave them a blow. Crushing. It couldn't even be considered a battle. It was a one-sided crushing without any obstacles. His Majesty, the Demon Lord, who was dressed in a long green robe and had a handsome face, did not even draw his sword. For half a month, he sent his opponent to the ground with just one move each time. It was the same today. Jiyu nodded at the demon clan with a complicated expression and left the arena without looking back. In front of him, the countless demons watching the battle consciously opened up a path for him. At this moment, the way the demon race looked at Jiyu was very different. Jiyu sensed these changes. Her expression did not change, but her gaze softened slightly. Is it fun? As soon as he entered the palace, he saw his lover waiting for him. Jiyu shook his head. Seeing him like this, Gu Xingyi couldn't help but laugh. You really think you're He Qianglu? What's the point of bullying these little guys? The little fellows she was referring to were naturally the demons. Based on Jiyu and Gu Xingyi's real age, these demons were indeed little fellows. Jiyu's expression was indifferent. I just think that they should have a good understanding of their own strength. Of course, the most important thing was to let them have a deep understanding of their own strength. Jiyu thought silently. Chapter 21-30. In the next month or so, Jiyu resolutely continued his sparring. When he sliced off the crown of one of the 8 great demon kings of the Demon Emperor Mountain, the entire Demon Emperor Mountain was silent. The demon clans who had never taken the Demon Lord seriously looked at the not-so-imposing figure with a look of awe in their eyes. The demon clan had always respected the strong. Those demons who had been defeated by Ji did not feel that it was humiliating to be defeated by the demon lord. On the contrary, they were all very excited. No matter how powerful he was still the demon lord of the demon clan, wasn't he? Their demon clan had gained another powerful expert out of nowhere. This was a matter worthy of celebration. And those demons who had always been secretly jealous of He Qianglu and thought that he had made the demon lord fall in love with him at first sight because of his face, finally, they gave up. Not only did our demon lord have a face, he was also very cultured. No wonder he could make the powerful demon lord fall in love with him at first sight. In this way, Ji successfully blocked the thoughts of those little demons who wanted to climb into his lover's bed once and for all. It could be said that he was quite scheming. In the Demon Lord Palace, Gu Xingyin was overjoyed. She had never thought that Ji Yu would actually play such a trick. Seeing her laughing, Ji Yu was a little helpless. Is it that funny? Gu Xingyin nodded repeatedly. Of course, in my heart, you have always been like the clouds in the sky. How could you do such a down-to-earth thing? Ji Yu could not help but laugh when he heard this. He reached out and carefully tidied up Gu Xingyin's hair that was messed up because of her laughter just now. Then, he held her shoulder and said seriously. Yin, the me you are talking about is the me in everyone's eyes. Only the me now will be jealous because of you. The me who is scheming because of you is the real Ji Yu who belongs to you alone. Gu Xingyin, who was caught off guard by the confession, was completely satisfied. She took the initiative to wrap her arms around her lover's neck and pressed her forehead against his. She smiled and said, no matter what you look like, you will always be my favorite. Hearing the faint sounds coming from the bedroom, Biqi and Qi Ji, who were guarding the outer hall, looked at each other and tacitly retreated. From the looks of it, the two majesties would not come out for at least 3 to 5 days. Gu Xingyin and Ji Yu had stayed in this world for over 1,000 years. After the previous Demon Emperor and Demon Empress gave birth to their second child and sent him to the Demon Emperor Palace, Gu Xingyin happened to raise this younger brother. When his younger brother turned 500 years old, Gu Xingyin imitated Bai Yin's parents and threw the responsibility to the sky-devouring python, who had just reached adulthood. Then, he brought Demon Lord to travel around the world. After a few more decades, the two of them had played around in this world and arrived at the space-time boundary of this cultivation world. See you in the next world. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, they stepped into the crack in front of them. A huge tearing force was transmitted to her body. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes and waited for the arrival of the next honeymoon. So painful. This was the only feeling Gu Xingyin had at this moment. It was as if a heavy blow had landed on her body. Gu Xingyin scanned with her divine sense and knew that the original body of this body was being beaten up. Recommended the novel, Transmigration System, Male God Strategy Guide, by the super promiscuous gay friend Huan Chu. Although the person is promiscuous, the novel is very reliable. Also, the new novel is starting number 2. Everyone, don't be anxious. Chapter 2131. It hurts. Gu Xingyin didn't have time to think about what was going on. She rolled on the ground and avoided the attacks of those people. She half-squatted and looked coldly at the people not far in front of her. There were 3 girls and 1 boy, wearing the same uniform. Seeing her reaction, the 4 people were obviously very surprised. The girl in the lead with thin curly hair glanced at her and sneered, "Our plasticine knows how to dodge." As soon as she said this, the people around her also laughed. Their laughter was full of disdain for Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin stood up slowly, ignoring the soreness and discomfort in her body. She looked at the 4 people one by one and said, "Zhang Qin, Lu Yan, Su Duo, He Kai." Her expression didn't change much, but when they heard their names being called out from those pale lips, the 4 of them suddenly shivered inexplicably. Zhang Qin, the leader, was secretly annoyed that she was frightened by a cowardly idiot. She stood out and snorted, "What? Our punching bag, plasticine, finally decided to rebel? She even learned to play tricks. Let me tell you, Zhou Qi, I've said before that people like you don't deserve to stay in our class at all. You're simply dragging down the average level of our class. Slap. A loud slap resounded in this remote corner. Zhang Qin covered her face with one hand and looked in shock at the pale girl who had appeared in front of her without her knowing. How could it be? How could Zhou Qi, that coward, have the guts to hit her? After a short period of shock, what was left was overwhelming shame and anger. She almost screamed with a twisted face, "You bitch," as she shouted. She raised her hand and was about to slap Gu Xingyin's face. Her impression of the person in front of her was still the Zhou Qi who didn't even dare to say a word when they bullied her. However, the person in front of her was Gu Xingyin. She easily caught Zhang Qin's hand and slapped her with the back of her hand. Zhang Qin was thrown to the ground by the huge force of the slap. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes and looked at her. "Zhang Qin, I've been in this school for 1.5 semesters, and you've brought people to block me for a total of 7 times. You've locked me in the maintenance bathroom twice. You've beaten and insulted me at will 19 times, and you've thrown away my homework 13 times. She said these words in a calm tone. These things clearly happened to her, but when this girl talked about it, her face was expressionless. It was as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. This Zhou Qi made the students feel unfamiliar and inexplicably afraid. Her cold eyes swept over the other people and she continued to read in a flat tone. Lu Yan, together with Zhou Qi, beat me 13 times, put worms in my cup twice, threw away my school bag 3 times. It was as if a spell had been cast on them as they listened to her recount the things she had done one by one in a daze. He Kai, the only boy, was the first to come to his senses. He frowned and looked at Gu Xingyin. At the same time, he comforted the others. Don't be frightened by her. I think Zhou Qi must have read something in a book and deliberately pretended to be mysterious to scare us. Chapter 2132. Hearing He Kai's words, the rest of the girls who had some doubts in their hearts were instantly relieved. Well, it had been more than a year. Who didn't know what kind of person Zhou Qi was? She must be pretending to be mysterious and deliberately scaring them. Besides, there were 4 of them here. Even if Zhou Qi's personality had changed, how could she turn the tables in their hands? Thinking of this, Zhang Qin, who had been helped up by many people, glared fiercely at Gu Xingyin with half of her face swollen. He Kai is right. This little bitch has grown courage today. She actually dared to resist. Today, we'll teach her how to behave properly. She looked at the few people around her and said, "Don't show mercy to this little bitch. How dare she hit me? We must teach her a good lesson. I'll invite you to Blue Ocean later." Blue Ocean was a very famous bar in this city. It was famous for its high prices. Even the average middle-level white-collar workers had to consider the price carefully. For students like them, it was completely sky-high. But this was not a problem for Zhang Qin at all. As the second-generation child of a wealthy family, Zhang Qin's friends and acquaintances were mostly brought over by money. At that moment, when everyone heard her words, they were all refreshed. Without saying anything, they approached Gu Xingyin. This action was exactly what Gu Xingyin wanted. Coincidentally, she had also made up her mind to settle the score with her classmates. 3 minutes later. In this dim corner, 4 people were already lying down. Gu Xingyin was not biased at all. The 4 people's faces were all swollen, not to mention their bodies. She did not show any mercy at all. They were in severe pain, but they were not unconscious and could not move. Gu Xingyin walked to them slowly and slowly took out their mobile phones one by one. In front of them, she opened them, broke the cards inside, and threw them into the abandoned sink. Then, as if they were dragging garbage, after 2 trips, all of them were sent to the corner of the washroom at the end of the corridor that had been abandoned for a long time. Half a month ago, it was them who had locked Zhou Qi in here. After an entire day and night, Zhou Qi was finally found. The girl, who was too frightened, had a high fever and fell seriously ill. She finally rested for more than a week and returned to school, but before she could have a few days of peace, she was blocked by these vicious guys again. This was the old teaching building of the school. It was located in the southeast corner of the school and was very secluded. Since last year, there had been no students attending classes here. If one did not intentionally pass by this place, even if the people inside shouted themselves hoarse, no one would hear them. Gu Xingyin threw the four of them side by side and walked out in front of them. Then, with a click, she locked the door. The four people inside widened their eyes in shock and anger. They even heard a sinister female voice outside. "Oh right, I forgot to tell you. This old teaching building is not peaceful, especially this washroom. Someone once committed suicide here. If you see anything unclean at night, don't be scared out of your wits." This place was very spacious. The girl's sinister voice echoed eerily in this quiet place. The four people lying on the ground, unable to move, all had terrified expressions on their faces. Chapter 2133. Gu Xingyin turned around and went out with her school bag without any psychological burden. These things, even the words she just said, were all done to her by these people in the past. It was just that when those people abused others, they casually said those vicious words, but she probably didn't take it to heart at all. Now, only when they experienced it themselves, would they know how terrible it was, right? At this time, there were not many people in the school, and Gu Xingyin walked alone in the school without attracting any attention. Carrying her school bag, she followed the memory of this body and slowly walked in a direction. After many turns, Gu Xingyin finally came to her home after passing through one remote alley after another. If she didn't see it with her own eyes, it would be hard to imagine that such a shabby place could exist in such a developed city. The ground was bumpy, and black dirty water flowed freely along the uneven gullies. In the hot April weather, it emitted a strange smell that was both rancid and stinky. There were all kinds of stalls selling goods on electric tricycles, and some people squatted by the roadside to eat on small plastic stools. There were even people who directly hung their private underwear outside to dry. Gu Xingyin walked through all this with a wooden expression and turned into an old building on the left. It was very shabby, and the walls were mottled with various scratches and gray mud after white paint fell off. The walkway was also very messy, with all kinds of garbage piled up. The young couple on the second floor was quarreling again. Gu Xingyin frowned and walked to the third floor. She took out the key and opened the door. This was a small one-bedroom apartment. Although it was very small, it was kept as clean as possible. There was no refrigerator. Gu Xingyin looked at a small space on the side that was used as a kitchen. There was only a half-open packet of noodles and 2 scallions. She had no appetite, so she sat on the bed in the room and began to recall the experience of this body. Zhou Qi's parents divorced when she was very, very young. Her mother left the city without any reluctance, and there was no news of her since then. Her father also disliked this burden, so he directly threw his young daughter to her old mother and went out to indulge in debauchery alone. Ever since she was a child, Zhou Qi could only remember her grandmother who cooked delicious noodles with eggs for her. As for her father, he only saw him a few times a year, and every time they met, that stubbled man would only scold him loudly in disdain. Then, when she was 10 years old, she received news of the man's death. He had drunk too much and died suddenly. Her grandmother cried loudly, but Zhou Qi's face was numb. To her grandmother, her father was her own flesh and blood, but to Zhou Qi, that man was just someone she hated more than a stranger. This kind of experience since childhood caused Zhou Qi to have an inferiority complex and timid character. Ever since she was young, she had always been an invisible person in any class. She always lowered her head and shrunk her shoulders, wishing that the whole world would not notice her. In addition, there were rumors that she was a wild child without parents. Every time her classmates saw that she only had 2 pieces of old clothes other than her school uniform, they naturally looked down on her. She was the target of bullying in school since she was young. Children in their teens did not know what it meant to be malicious. They probably didn't know how much damage their casual and willful bullying would cause to a young heart. Chapter 2134. Zhou Qi was the only one who lived here. Her grandmother passed away when she was in her 2nd year of junior high school. In the past 2 years, she had relied on some subsidies from the school and the government, and occasionally did some odd jobs to make a living. Speaking of odd jobs, the only thing Zhou Qi could do at her age was to wash dishes and do odd jobs in some small private fast food restaurants around. Gu Xingyin looked around and sighed softly. After she came into this body, she did her best to modify her body's functions. It would not affect her at all if she did not eat for a day or two. The most important thing now was to improve the living conditions of this body. Of course, the school was the most important thing. In Zhou Qi's memory, she had been bullied quite a lot. However, what was the result of the incident? Her kind and strict head teacher called her to the office and talked to her for more than half an hour. In the end, this incident was determined to be a small quarrel among classmates. Not to mention compensation, there was not even an apology. It was because of the school's non-interference and even indulgence that Zhang Qin and her group became more and more fearless. Thinking of the number 1 middle school in B City, which was the school Zhou Qi studied in, Gu Xingyin's face turned cold. Not only those who had bullied her, but also this school. She would slowly return everything that they had given Zhou Qi, one by one. Gu Xingyin's eyes suddenly lit up. She turned around and looked at the door. At the same time, the door, which had been tightly closed after she entered, suddenly opened automatically. Standing outside the door was a young man in a snow-white shirt with a noble temperament. At first glance, one could tell that he did not belong to this place. Gu Xingyin smiled when she saw him. "You're here so soon." The young man, or Jiyu, walked in and looked around. He did not care that Gu Xingyin's school uniform was dirty because of the previous bullying. He hugged her tightly in his arms. "I'm sorry to let you suffer." Gu Xingyin said carelessly, "Who can let me suffer? I left this behind before I came." Needless to say, both of them knew what he meant by before. Gu Xingyin glanced at Ji Yu and said angrily, "I say, why did I become like this and you can be the young master of a rich family? It's too unfair." Hearing this, Ji Yu smiled. "What's mine, isn't it all yours?" That one sentence successfully soothed his lover. Ji Yu lowered her head, and their foreheads touched. Several messages were instantly transmitted to Gu Xingyin's mind. His identity in this world was the young master of a very famous family in B City's political circles. He had a sister who was a strong woman in politics who had inherited the family business. He also had a brother who was doing well in the business world. As for him, he was born with heart disease and had been in poor health since he was young. He had always been like a crystal prince in the family. Jiyu had only arrived in this body after the crystal prince had suddenly died of an illness. Of course, after he came over, although he could not completely cure the heart disease in order to not attract attention, he could control it so that it would not have a relapse for the rest of his life. When Gu Xingyin knew what had happened to Jiyu, Jiyu also knew what had happened to Zhou Qi's body. Chapter 2135. "Shall I take you out of here?" he said. With his ability and conditions, he could change Gu Xingyin to a better environment and living conditions. Gu Xingyin refused him. "Don't worry about it for the time being." Hearing this, Jiyu glanced at her, seeming to be puzzled. Gu Xingyin smiled. "This kind of external environment won't have any effect on me now." She lowered her head to look at herself and said, "In any case, I've taken over her body. It can be considered fate. Those who owe her, I have to repay them on her behalf." Jiyu didn't say anything. He just took out a bank card from his pocket. "Take this. At least change to a better place to live and live a better life." Although he knew that his lover didn't care about these things and no one could hurt her, Jiyu still hoped that Gu Xingyin could live a better life. This time, Gu Xingyin didn't refuse. Before they said a few words, Jiyu's cell phone rang in his pocket. He answered the phone, and it seemed to be his family on the other side. Gu Xingyin looked at Jiyu and said a few words indifferently before hanging up the phone. He turned around and looked at Gu Xingyin. I have to go back now." Gu Xingyin nodded. Jiyu's body, Chen Shiza, was doted on by his family on the one hand because of his poor health since he was a child, and on the other hand, they were particularly concerned about his whereabouts. This time, he didn't go home at this time, which naturally made his family very worried. He looked at Gu Xingyin and couldn't help but remind her, remember to change to a better place to live, and then go out to eat better and buy some comfortable clothes. His unfinished words disappeared between the two of them as their lips pressed against each other. The afterglow of the setting sun refracted through the small window, gently falling on the kissing boy in white shirt and the girl in uniform, leaving a beautiful silhouette on the not-so-white wall. Gu Xingyin gently bit Ji Yu's beautiful thin lips and said with a smile, I know, little housekeeper. Ji Yu raised her eyebrows and retorted, I will only take care of your family. The next day, Gu Xingyin was still dressed in an inconspicuous school uniform. She carried her backpack and walked slowly into the school. As usual, no one noticed her. She walked straight to the darkest corner of the classroom. This was the place with the worst environment in the entire classroom. It was close to the trash can, and there was no sunlight all year round. No one was willing to sit here, and Zhou Qi wouldn't resist. Since the first month of school, she had become a resident here. The high school seats were piled high with books. Zhou Qi was so small that she couldn't even see the top of her head when she sat down. One could imagine how difficult it was for her to listen to the class. Gu Xingyin sat quietly and listened to the self-study bell ring. As expected, Zhang Qin and the others didn't come for the morning self-study. Those girls usually liked to play, so it wasn't strange for them to not go home for a night. At this time, no one had found that they were missing, right? The students in the class looked at them strangely, but they didn't care too much. Those students were in the small group with the best family conditions in the class, so they naturally didn't take their studies seriously. It was no big deal for them to miss the morning self-study. In this way, it wasn't until the third class in the morning that the head teacher, Lu Hong, found that something was wrong. Chapter 2136. After the fourth class at noon, Gu Xingyin heard the voice of the head teacher, Lu Hong. Zhou Qi, come to my office after class. These words were said in the classroom. Almost as soon as the head teacher finished speaking, the eyes of the whole class fell on Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change at all. She just said, oh. Her calm appearance was naturally interpreted as dullness in Lu Hong's eyes. She glanced at Gu Xingyin impatiently and left the classroom without saying anything. The fourth class. After class. The students in the class all went to the school cafeteria in groups. Of course, many people who didn't like the food in the cafeteria would choose to eat at the snack bar. Gu Xingyin stood up silently and walked toward the cafeteria. The school cafeteria, which was despised by countless students, had always been delicious to Zhou Qi. Because it was too expensive. After knowing that Zhou Qi's daily diet was steamed buns with chili sauce for lunch and noodles for dinner. If she was more extravagant, she would add an egg to the noodles. Gu Xingyin understood that a high school student was only as tall as a middle school student. When it was time to eat, of course, she would go to eat. As for the head teacher, eating was the most important thing. She just waited. Gu Xingyin slowly went to the cafeteria and ordered 2 meat dishes and 1 vegetable dish. After eating, she went to the head teacher, Lu Hong's office. Lu Hong and others were waiting angrily. When they saw Gu Xingyin, they didn't look very good. Zhou Qi, I asked you to come to my office after class. Did you turn a deaf ear to my words? If it were an ordinary student, they might really be scared out of their wits. But who was Gu Xingyin? She didn't even lift her eyelids and calmly replied, I was very hungry. I went to have lunch. Lu Hong was very angry at her words. She called several students' parents in the morning and confirmed that they didn't go home. The students' cell phones couldn't be contacted. She was very anxious. How could she be in the mood to eat? At this moment, seeing Gu Xingyin's leisurely and calm appearance, she felt a burst of anger in her heart. However, she really didn't have any problems with it. It was natural for people to eat. How could you stop her from saying no? Therefore, she only looked upset and questioned Gu Xingyin. I heard from a few classmates that after school yesterday, Zhang Qin, Duo He, Kai, and Lu Yan went to look for you. What happened? When Gu Xingyin heard this, a strange smile appeared on her face. It was like mockery and disdain on her palm-sized pale face that was covered by her bangs. No matter how one looked at it, there was a strange feeling that made one's heart turn cold. Lu Hong had such a feeling at the moment. She took a closer look. The girl standing in front of her was still the silent and even stupefied Zhou Qi. She breathed a sigh of relief and thought to herself that she was indeed under too much pressure. Gu Xingyin said softly, "Teacher, I've been looked for by Zhang Qin and the others so many times. Why didn't you ask about it?" So many times naturally referred to the many times that Zhou Qi had been bullied. Lu Hong was rendered speechless by the question. Why didn't she ask? Of course, she had long known what had happened in secret. It was just that Zhou Qi's family didn't have parents to support her, and she couldn't compare with Zhang Qin and the others who always sent her things in private. After weighing the pros and cons, she naturally turned a blind eye to it. It was just that this kind of thing was pointed out by a student in front of her, which really made her lose face. Chapter 2137. She put on a stern face and said sternly, "Zhou Qi, is this how you speak to your teacher? The teacher is asking you a question, and you're just trying to change the subject? Do you have any respect for me as your form teacher?" Was she trying to oppress her? Gu Xingyin stared at Lu Hong with her clear eyes and grinned. No. What? Lu Hong was stunned, and then she was furious. She was rebelling. This Zhou Qi, did she eat a leopard's guts today? How dare she talk back to her teacher so openly? At this time, Zhou Hong looked at Gu Xingyin with more and more disgust. She was very snobbish to begin with. She had always treated the students in her class who were not well off or had poor grades as invisible people. Not to mention people like Zhou Qi. Her grades were terrible, she had no family, she didn't know how to cause trouble, and she didn't know how to speak well. In less than a year, Lu Hong had thought of ways to transfer Zhou Qi out of her class countless times. Previously, the words that Zhang Qin and the others had said to Gu Xingyin, "The existence of people like you is simply dragging down the average level of our class," had come from Lu Hong's mouth. It was hard to imagine that this was something that a teacher could say. Lu Hong was very angry. At the same time, she thought that this was a good opportunity to get rid of Zhou Qi, this troublemaker. As she thought this, a trace of expression naturally appeared on her face. She looked at Gu Xingyin with a bitter and hateful expression, as if her heart was aching. "Zhou Qi, when you first came to my class, I was thinking that although your grades were not good and you were not popular in class, as a teacher, as a form teacher, I have an obligation to take care of every student and not give up on any of them. I have never had any prejudice against you, but you have disappointed me too much." After saying this, she seemed very satisfied and concluded, "Since you are not satisfied with me as a teacher, I also feel that there is no way to teach you. I will report to the Academic Affairs Office and explain, teacher." A soft female voice interrupted her. Lu Hong looked over with some dissatisfaction. She saw a thin and small girl staring at her innocently with a pair of big eyes. The words that came out of her mouth almost made her unable to breathe. "Teacher Lu, what I'm saying is that I didn't see Zhang Qin and her classmates yesterday." "What are you talking about?" "Lu Hong." She looked at the girl who seemed to be very obedient standing in front of her and only felt that she was speechless. Gu Xingyin looked at her calmly, as if he was extremely obedient. Lu Hong was very stifled. She had originally planned to expel Zhou Qi in the name of disrespecting her teacher, but she had not expected Zhou Qi to say such words. What could she say? She could only hold it in. Blame yourself for being too dramatic. However, she didn't believe Gu Xingyin's words at all. She looked at Gu Xingyin suspiciously and said coldly, "Zhou Qi, don't lie in front of the teacher. I have asked several students, and they all said that they saw Zhang Qin and the others go to find you with their own eyes. Why did you lie to me?" Gu Xingyin's mouth twitched. "I didn't lie to you. Zhang Qin and the others did come to find me. They were bored and wanted to bully me. I am not a fool. If I can't provoke them, can't I avoid them?" Chapter 2138. She looked at Lu Hong calmly and said, "So when I saw them coming to find me, I ran away." Lu Hong, to be honest, in her heart, Zhou Qi was not much different from a fool in the past. It seemed to be the first time she met this student. It turned out that Zhou Qi was such a sharp-tongued student. But Lu Hong did not believe what she said. Her intuition told her that the disappearance of Zhang Qin and the others must have something to do with Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin was a little amused as he watched her constantly changing expressions. There were many places in the school that did not have surveillance cameras, and she was a marginalized figure in the class. Who would notice her movements? Even when she went out of the school gate, Gu Xingyin chose the blind spots of the surveillance cameras. Even if the school pulled out the surveillance records at the school gate, there was no way to find out when she left the school. Lu Hong thought for a while and suddenly said to Gu Xingyin sternly, "Zhou Qi, don't lie. Many students saw you and Zhang Qin leave. Let me tell you, if you tell me the truth now, I can still help you solve this matter. Otherwise, I can only call the police." She lowered her voice and said to Gu Xingyin with a serious face, "If you call the police, the school will not be able to suppress it. This kind of thing can go to jail." Upon hearing that, Gu Xingyin played along and put on a fearful expression. Lu Hong was proud in her heart. She was indeed a poor student who had not seen the world. She was suppressed by the word, "call the police." She would definitely answer all the questions later. Then she heard the other party's weak voice, then, "Teacher, let's call the police quickly. It's such a serious matter. It's better to call the police and let the police handle it." Lu Hong looked at Gu Xingyin's clear eyes and felt very aggrieved. She felt that the other party was doing it on purpose. This matter must have something to do with her, this Zhou Qi. She said coldly, "In this case, Zhou Qi, I can only report it to the school and the police. I only hope that you won't regret it." Gu Xingyin yawned. "Okay, teacher. If there's nothing else, I'll go back and take a nap." Lu Hong held back for a long time before she managed to resist the urge to throw the surrounding lesson plans directly at the other party's face. She watched as Gu Xingyin walked out of the office, her face full of anger. "Motherfucker." In the empty office, the female teacher with a gentle appearance cursed. Gu Xingyin could imagine how Lu Hong would react. That was her personality. They bullied the kind and feared the evil. They were used to hugging the big shots. But what did this have to do with her? Gu Xingyin took a nap without any psychological burden, and then she was called to the office again in the afternoon. This time, in addition to Lu Hong, there was also the school's dean, a middle-aged man who looked a little familiar. Judging from his title, he was the vice principal. There were also 2 policemen in uniform standing beside him. Zhou Qi's timid look made Lu Hong angry. Zhou Qi was not like this when they were in the office at noon. She did not speak, but the dean frowned and looked at her sternly. "Student Zhou Qi, I heard that yesterday, you contacted a few students in our school who didn't come to class today?" Gu Xingyin sneered in her heart. He was indeed a powerful dean. The moment he came, he put such a big label on her. Chapter 2139. She sneered in her heart, but her body trembled with the dean's words. She even took a small step back in fright, looking at the dean with a pair of big eyes in horror. The dean, looking at her, those who didn't know the truth might think that he had done something to her. Obviously, the 2 policemen didn't know the truth. They glanced at the tall and busty dean and then looked at the pale and thin Gu Xingyin. It was self-evident which one they favored in their hearts. One of the younger policemen saw Gu Xingyin's white t-shirt under her school uniform jacket and thought of his sister who was spoiled by the whole family. He had mixed feelings for a while. He couldn't help but take a step forward and said softly to Gu Xingyin, "Zhou Qi, your name is Zhou Qi, right? Don't be afraid. We're just here to ask a routine question." Gu Xingyin lowered her head and didn't say anything, but she obviously relaxed a lot. The policeman asked about what happened after school last night. The young policeman noticed that after he asked this question, the little girl in front of him immediately had a look of horror on her face. He couldn't help but frown, wondering what this little girl had encountered that caused her to reveal such an expression of extreme fear. Gu Xingyin didn't come here today without saying anything. On the contrary, she wanted to say not only what they wanted to know, but also something that the school didn't want people to know. In the eyes of the teachers and the policemen, this little girl was scared out of her wits when she heard the names of Zhang Qin and the others. In the eyes of the head teacher, Lu Hong, this was a sign of a guilty conscience. She couldn't help but say, "Zhou Qi, the leaders and the policemen are here today. If you really did something, it's not too late to say it now." Another big accusation was put on her. It seemed that she was sure that this matter had something to do with her. Gu Xingyin finally raised her head. They were surprised to find that her face was full of tears. Gu Xingyin shivered and replied, "Yesterday after school, Zhang Qin and the others did come to find me." Hearing this, Lu Hong was delighted. She asked repeatedly, "They came to find you, and then what? Where did you go? What did you do to them? Why are they still nowhere to be seen?" The two policemen on the side frowned. How could there be such a teacher who tried to put the blame on a student when there was no evidence? The young policeman stepped forward and stood between Lu Hong and Gu Xingyin. He said to Gu Xingyin gently, "Zhou Qi, don't be afraid. Tell us what happened yesterday." He completely did not believe that such a weak and delicate little girl could do anything. Gu Xingyin nodded and continued, "When Zhang Qin and the others came to me yesterday, I was very scared. I knew that they were going to beat me again, and they were going to tear my books and homework." When she spoke of this, there was still a look of lingering fear on her face. The head teacher and the dean's expressions were a little ugly. This kind of thing could be considered a scandal in the school, and it was a little embarrassing in front of outsiders. The dean coughed softly and said, "Zhou Qi, let's not talk about such insignificant things. Just tell us what happened." Chapter 2140. The two policemen looked at each other and saw the anger in each other's eyes. When the students in the school suffered such treatment, as teachers and school leaders, their reaction was, "Is this just an insignificant matter?" Especially the young policeman, because he had a younger sister who was about the same age as Gu Xingyin, he naturally cherished her. He immediately frowned and asked, "Zhou Qi, according to what you said, have you been treated like this before? This is violence. Didn't you report it to the teachers in the class?" As he spoke, he glanced at Lu Hong. Gu Xingyin just continued to say in a low voice with a pale face, "I told Miss Lu. But she said it was a small joke between classmates and asked me not to disturb her." Lu Hong's face became very ugly. She knew very well what was going on, and this reason was just a perfunctory excuse. Anyway, Zhou Qi didn't have any parents at home, and she didn't know anyone who could support her. It was just a perfunctory excuse. Who knew that she would say it at this time? And in front of the policeman. When the two policemen heard this, their faces were already very ugly. It turned out that the little girl in front of him was the victim. Those missing students, on normal days, actually played the role of the bully. The young policeman said to the vice principal seriously, "Principal Zhang, about what Zhou Qi said, we will cooperate with your school after dealing with this matter." The vice principal's smile was a little awkward. He said dryly, "We'll talk about it later. The matter at hand is more important." The two policemen also knew the priority, so they could only continue to ask Gu Xingyin. After all, according to what she said, those missing students did have something to do with her. Gu Xingyin just shook her head. "I was afraid of being beaten. When I saw them come to me, of course I ran away without saying anything. I ran straight home and didn't meet those students again." The implication was that they had nothing to do with her. After hearing Gu Xingyin's words, the people in the office looked at each other. According to Gu Xingyin's words, the clue that they had found with great difficulty was cut off just like that. The two teachers in the school were naturally unwilling to accept this. One had to know that the schools that were missing now were the schools with better family conditions. Now, the parents of the other schools had already received the news and were on their way to the school. If they were to cause a ruckus, how would they clean up the mess? They didn't believe Gu Xingyin's words at all and wanted to interrogate her again. However, the two policemen believed that a young girl like Gu Xingyin wouldn't have anything to do with the disappearance of the students and let her go back to rest. Gu Xingyin thanked the two policemen and walked out of the classroom quietly. She didn't go home directly. Instead, she closed her eyes and stood on the street for a while. She accurately found a young man who was carrying a SLR camera in front of his chest and dressed very low-key. "What's the matter, little girl?" The young man saw Gu Xingyin standing in front of him and hurriedly asked. Gu Xingyin raised her head and looked at him very calmly. "I know you're looking for news material now." The man looked at her in surprise. Then Gu Xingyin asked word by word, "School violence. Are you interested in this topic?" Chapter 2141. Gu Xingyin chatted with the reporter for a long time. Finally, when she got up and left, she glanced at the reporter's eyes. "You didn't meet anyone in particular today. What you know about school violence is what you saw with your own eyes. In the next few days, you will sneak into the school and see for yourself what kind of attitude B City No. 1 Middle School has towards this matter." The reporter nodded with a dazed expression. Gu Xingyin turned and left. About 5 minutes later, the reporter suddenly came back to his senses as if he had been patted by someone. He was a little stunned about what he had just done, but soon intense emotions filled his mind. "I didn't expect that the school, which has such a good reputation, would condone such an outrageous thing." When he thought of what he had seen by chance not long ago, anger surged in his heart. School violence, right? He wanted to expose the disgusting truth of the school. He started to do it. The young reporter looked firmly in the direction of the school and was ready to go back to prepare the materials immediately. Gu Xingyin returned home after dinner. If nothing unexpected happened, the police would be able to find those guys in the abandoned teaching building tonight. Then tomorrow, there would be a lot of work to do. Sure enough, when she arrived at school the next day, she was immediately called by the class monitor. "Zhou Qi, Teacher Lu asked you to go to her office when you arrive at school." The class monitor was a tall and thin boy. He was a good person and was very popular in the class. He whispered to Gu Xingyin, "Teacher Lu seems to be very angry." Gu Xingyin nodded. "Thank you." She put down her school bag and walked toward the head teacher's office without any burden. It was still early, and Lu Hong was the only teacher in the office. "Zhou Qi." Lu Hong's face darkened when she saw her walk in. "Stand next to the wall. What did you say when we asked you yesterday? That you have nothing to do with the missing students? Do you think you'll be fine if no one finds out? Those students have been found, and they all said that you locked them in the abandoned teaching building. You're simply lawless." Lu Hong seems to be very angry. Seeing that Gu Xingyin is still silent with her head down, she seems to feel very unaccomplished. She picked up a book and threw it at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin's eyes moved slightly. She could have dodged it, but she thought of something and stood there motionless, allowing the book to hit her. The sharp corner of the book scratched her forehead, leaving a shocking wound. Almost in an instant, dark red blood flowed down from Gu Xingyin's forehead, contrasting with her pale face, making her look even more pitiful. Seeing her like this, Lu Hong's anger dissipated a little. However, her tone was still very unpleasant. "Let me tell you, Zhou Qi, this matter is very serious. Our school has already called the police, and the parents of a few students will come later. Given your situation, we will definitely deal with it seriously and even expel you." "Humph. Just wait for the police to deal with you." After saying this, she seemed to be very happy and drank a cup of tea in a good mood. Gu Xingyin raised her head and looked at Lu Hong. "I didn't. They have nothing to do with me." Lu Hong sneered. "You still want to quibble? For students testified that you beat them up like that and locked them from the inside. You still want to quibble?" Chapter 2142. Gu Xingyin glanced at her. Between remaining silent and refuting, she chose the former. Anyway, when the others came later, she still had to say what needed to be said. Saying it again now was a complete waste of time and energy. Thus, she quietly leaned against the wall with her head lowered. Others saw her as sad, but in reality, she was just resting with her eyes closed. She didn't know how much time had passed. There was a light knock on the office door. Hearing such a gentle way of knocking on the door, Gu Xingyin roughly knew who it was. She looked up and saw the two policemen from yesterday pushing the door open and walking in. Upon seeing Gu Xingyin, the young policeman was taken aback. He walked up to her anxiously and asked, "What happened to your face? Why is there so much blood?" When Lu Hong heard this, a trace of unnaturalness flashed across her face. She said first, "This child was careless. Teacher Lu hit me," Gu Xingyin said calmly. Lu Hong's words came to an abrupt end. Her eyes were like fire as she glared at Gu Xingyin. This Zhou Qi usually didn't say anything. When she was bullied, she didn't even cry. She thought that the other party would suffer in silence. She didn't expect that she would actually learn to complain. When the young policeman heard this, he looked at Lu Hong angrily. "Teacher Lu, as a teacher, it's not good to hit a student, right?" Lu Hong thought that since Zhou Qi was already like this, she didn't have to put in any effort to save face. She only said coldly, "Officers, don't forget that the person standing in front of you is the murderer who injured a classmate and locked her in the old teaching building." The young policeman didn't care about her words at all. He squatted down and looked at the scar on Gu Xingyin's forehead with some heartache. "Does it hurt?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. She could block out the pain. Otherwise, she wouldn't have chosen to hurt herself like this. If she wanted to, she could even recover from such a wound in less than a night. Little did she know that her performance was even more heartbreaking in the eyes of outsiders. The police officer looked around and found a pack of clean tissue. He filled a glass with water and wanted to wipe Gu Xingyin carefully. However, Gu Xingyin reacted strongly and tried to break free. What a joke! She wanted to keep this appearance of hers. It was just that he couldn't tell this kind police officer. She could only pretend that she didn't want strangers to get close to her. Seeing her so resistant, the young policeman sighed and didn't insist. He stood up, but Gu Xingyin suddenly raised her head and stared at him without blinking. "I didn't do it." He was stunned for a moment before he realized what Gu Xingyin was talking about. He smiled and said softly, "Big brother believes in you." Another middle-aged policeman had been watching this scene silently until now. Only now did he look at Lu Hong, who was sitting at the desk, with a cold expression and said, "Last night was just a one-sided statement from a few people involved. We still need to investigate what happened. Teacher, it's best if you don't jump to conclusions." Lu Hong was so angry that her heart hurt. What was going on with these two policemen? It was such a good opportunity. As long as it was determined that it was Zhou Qi, the jinx, who did this, the case could be closed. Wouldn't it be good for everyone to be happy? However, these words couldn't be said directly. For a moment, the office fell into silence. They were all silent, waiting for the arrival of the other people involved. About 10 minutes later, the office door was pushed open rudely. A sharp female voice cursed, "I heard that the little bastard who hit my baby daughter is here. Which one is it? I want to see who gave her the guts to do that." Chapter 2143. While they were talking, Gu Xingyin saw a middle-aged woman with delicate wavy hair and wearing a branded dress walk into the office with a bad face. The woman's sharp eyes scanned the whole office and soon locked on the target. Gu Xingyin was the only student standing here. "Is it you? You're the one called Zhou Qi." The middle-aged woman looked at Gu Xingyin with a critical gaze and suddenly walked up to her and raised her hand. "I heard that you're a motherless girl. No wonder you did such a vicious thing." As she spoke, she came to Gu Xingyin's side and raised her hand high and was about to fall, but she was stopped by a hand. It was the young policeman who had been standing beside Gu Xingyin. The young policeman had been frowning since the middle-aged woman walked in. Now he couldn't stand her almost barbaric behavior, such a domineering mother, no wonder her child bullied her classmates. "Madam, please don't hit her." He let go of the woman's hand and tried to be polite. The middle-aged woman turned around impatiently. Seeing him in uniform, she restrained herself a little, but she was still unwilling to give up. "What? This girl bullied my daughter. As a mother, I saw my daughter being bullied. Can't I make a decision for my child? The young policeman obviously didn't have enough social experience. He couldn't stand many things, but his mouth wasn't very sharp. He could only emphasize one sentence: it's wrong to hit people. You're an adult, so you can't argue with a child. The woman raised her eyebrows and looked like she was about to lose her temper, but another policeman stood up. He glanced at the woman and said, "The truth hasn't come out yet. We're working here. Madam, please don't interfere with our work." The middle-aged woman glared at the two policemen and rolled her eyes at Gu Xingyin, who was being protected by the two policemen, before turning around and walking to the door. The older policeman's face didn't change. He had seen a lot of people over the years. People like the parent today were typical bullies. If you tried to reason with her, she would think that you were afraid of her, and she would become more and more arrogant. He might as well use his power to suppress them. The middle-aged woman quickly pulled a girl in a skirt and walked in. It was Zhang Qin. She was dressed up beautifully, wearing a new dress. Looking at her, there was not a trace of injury on her body. Gu Xingyin laughed in her heart. She had a sense of propriety when she beat them up yesterday. She was sure that those people would suffer enough, and it would not be obvious on the surface. In comparison, Zhou Qi, who still had a bruise on her face and various wounds under her clothes, was definitely much weaker. As soon as Zhang Qin walked into the classroom and saw Gu Xingyin, her expression changed. "Zhou Qi, you little bitch, just you wait." The two policemen looked at each other. No matter how they looked at it, this little girl named Zhou Qi was more like the real victim. Yesterday, when they found the students, they were still terrified. One of the girls was even crying. Unexpectedly, after just one night of rest, these people had returned to their original appearance. This was their usual style, right? Gu Xingyin didn't say anything. She just stood quietly behind them with her head lowered. Chapter 2144. It was precisely because of this reaction that everyone felt that her appearance was very distressing. Soon, the parents of the other students also came to the office. The originally spacious office became a little cramped because of the arrival of these people. Gu Xingyin suddenly raised her head and looked in the direction of the door. She saw a familiar figure coming in behind many parents. It was the reporter. Reporter Wang Lu took advantage of a loophole. In his line of work, the most important ability was to be flexible. This time, he had thought of a way to find out that the parents of those students had been found. Today, the parents would be coming here to seek justice. Usually, the entrance of number 1 middle school was very strict, but today, the school told them that the parents of several students would come. Wang Lu followed behind the students and their parents, but no one doubted him. These families were not familiar with each other, so they probably regarded him as a member of each other's family. The first thing Wang Lu saw when he entered the office was Gu Xingyin standing in front of him. He narrowed his eyes. Looking at the people in the office, he turned on the camera and recording equipment on his sleeve without a trace, and then stood quietly behind the people. "Mr. Lu, there are 2 policemen." Zhang Qin's mother, who was the woman from before, spoke first. "It's very clear that this girl named Zhou Qi has no love for her classmates. She bullied our Qin and other classmates. I don't think I can accept that my daughter is in the same school as such a vicious classmate. The school must respond to this. You police must also act according to the law." Her attitude was quite tough. Gu Xingyin knew very well that most of her confidence came from her superior family conditions. This kind of person was a typical example of a person whose material conditions had improved, but her quality and upbringing still remained at the most primitive and backward level. However, there were many such people in this society. After Zhang Qin's mother finished speaking, she immediately got the agreement of several other parents. "I think this parent is right. She is so vicious at such a young age. What will happen when she grows up? Now she dares to do such a thing to her classmates. Who will guarantee my child's safety when she goes to school in the future? She must be severely punished." Reporter Wang Lu didn't say anything. He just silently looked at the girl standing by the side with her head lowered. She was small and thin, standing in front of a group of arrogant adults, she looked so helpless. For a moment, Wang Lu wanted to abandon his journalistic integrity, rush out in front of her, and loudly refute those aggressive parents. If he hadn't seen with his own eyes how this girl was bullied, he might have been brainwashed by their words. But before he could say anything, Gu Xingyin raised her head. She even took a step forward and stepped out from behind the young policeman. The young policeman subconsciously wanted to stop her, but Gu Xingyin's expression was very firm. She said softly, "I've been studying in No. 1 middle school for nearly a year, and I've also spent nearly a year with Zhang Qin and a few other classmates." Several parents frowned when they heard this. Zhang Qin's mother sneered. "How could you do such a thing to a classmate you've known for a year? You're really something." Chapter 2145. Gu Xingyin glanced at the mother and didn't say anything. She just slowly took off her coat. This was also a very strange thing about her. It was already quite hot in April. Everyone else was wearing skirts and short-sleeved shirts, but she was still wearing a school uniform jacket. But after she took off her coat, everyone stopped talking. They could clearly see that on the girl's exposed slender arms, there were all kinds of bruises, as well as dark purple bruises that seemed to be left behind for a long time. These were definitely not marks that could be left behind once or twice. Several parents were surprised and doubtful. The head teacher, Lu Hong's face was a little ugly. The two policemen and the reporter, Wang Lu, were full of anger. The young policeman quickly asked, "What's going on with your body?" There was still some anger in his tone. Just by looking at these scars, he could tell what kind of life this girl had been living in the past. Gu Xingyin held her coat and said slowly, "The latest scars were from last week when Zhang Qin, Su Duo, He Kai, and Lu Yan dragged me to the music room and beat me." As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the office suddenly changed. The vice principal, who had been standing behind and hadn't spoken, quickly came out to ease the embarrassment. "You child, you said that your injuries were caused by your classmates. Why didn't you tell me?" These words sounded as if this was a reason that Gu Xingyin deliberately made up. Gu Xingyin slowly glanced at the head teacher, who didn't look very good, and replied, "A year ago, when I was beaten for the first time, I told Teacher Lu. Teacher Lu said that it was a small fight between classmates and asked me not to take it to heart." The young policeman looked at Lu Hong in disbelief. "Teacher Lu, your student was beaten. Is this how you deal with it?" Lu Hong's face stiffened. She braced herself and replied, "What beaten? I've never heard her say that." She was trying to shirk the responsibility. Gu Xingyin suddenly burst into tears. Everyone was shocked by this development. As she cried, she sniffled and said, "Later, when I was bullied again, I also went to find Teacher Lu. She said a few words at first, but later on, she made me wear a long-sleeved jacket and said that I would scare my classmates. She moved me to the back of the class and then ignored me. The office was very quiet, and only the sound of her crying could be heard." Wang Lu clenched his fists tightly. He didn't have any siblings, but he thought that if he had a sister who was bullied at school, he would definitely fight with those people. Lu Hong interrupted her with a stern look. "I suspect that Zhou Qi has a series of hallucinations because she has been undisciplined for a long time and has been influenced by her family." She said angrily, "I've been a class teacher for more than 10 years, and I've always tried my best to be fair. I treat every student equally as if they were my own children. It's impossible for something like that to exist." The young policeman coldly pointed at the scar on Gu Xingyin's forehead that had already stopped bleeding. "So, when Teacher Lu is angry at home, he will also pick up something and throw it at his own daughter's face?" This wave of face slapping was beautiful. Gu Xingyin praised in her heart, but her face showed an expression of disbelief. Her expression of fear and uneasiness, as if she had seen the most unimaginable thing in the world, only made people feel embarrassed and uncomfortable. Chapter 2146. Such a young girl, at an age where she should be innocent and romantic, bore too much pain that shouldn't belong to her. Her crying came too suddenly, and even the parents who were originally aggressive were stunned. Then, Gu Xingyin began to talk while crying, September 30th last year was the day I was beaten for the first time. At that time, it was Zhang Qin and He Kai. The two of them were in a bad mood after quarreling, so they took me to the corner of the female toilet and slapped me 4 times. The second time was after the National Day holiday in October. Zhang Qin, Dudwa, and Lu Yan dragged me into the classroom and said that I was a bitch who complained to the teacher. At that time, the students in the class all saw it. She looked at the students who had evasive expressions and said, "Because the teacher didn't care, you became more and more excessive. You beat me, locked me in an empty room for a few days, and tore my books and workbooks. The students in the class all know about these things." As she spoke, her voice gradually lowered. When Grandma was still alive, she told me to forget those unhappy things and just remember the happy things. Her eyes were a little blank as she muttered, "But after Grandma died, how could I live a happy life?" The others subconsciously glanced at the students she was talking about. After all, they were teenagers. They couldn't be as thick-skinned as Lu Hong to distort the truth. Being looked at by everyone like this, the few of them were a little timid. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to speak. It was already quite obvious. "I'll beat you to death, you bastard." Suddenly, a loud roar came from the office. Everyone only saw He Kai's tall and strong father directly kick his knee, causing him to kneel down. Then, without saying anything, he pulled out his belt and whipped He Kai. "Your father sent you to school to bully your classmates? Bastard, you even bullied a female classmate? Hit a woman? Your father feels ashamed for you." He was very strong, and his outburst came suddenly. Everyone didn't react until they heard He Kai cry out twice. The first reaction of the surrounding parents was to protect their children and take 2 steps back. The older policeman was the first to react and quickly went up to pull him back. "You can't educate your child like this." He stepped forward and pulled her back. He Kai's father was still scolding, "Officer, don't stop me. I have to beat him up today and teach him a lesson." He was dragged to the other side and saw Gu Xingyin standing there. When he glared at her, Gu Xingyin was so scared that she quickly shrank back. Perhaps He Kai's father knew that he looked a little scary, so he forced himself to smile and said to Gu Xingyin, "Don't be afraid, classmate. I apologize to you on behalf of my son, He Kai. It's my uncle's fault for not teaching his son well. I'll get that little brat to apologize to you personally later." Gu Xingyin was a little surprised. He Kai was usually sloppy in school. She didn't expect him to be so timid when he saw his father. However, her impression of her father had improved by quite a bit. She didn't say anything and just stood there quietly. However, He Kai's father's behavior didn't mean that the other parents were happy. Zhang Qin's mother stood out and looked at Gu Xingyin with disdain. "Who knows if this girl is telling the truth? I heard that she doesn't have parents, right? It's easy for a child like her to have problems. She can lock her classmates in an abandoned classroom today. What if she does something even worse tomorrow?" Seeing that everyone was looking at her, she said with conviction, "I don't care what happened in the past. My daughter was bullied yesterday. I have to get justice for her." Chapter 2147. The young policeman opened his mouth. He felt extremely angry in his heart, but he couldn't say anything for a while. It was probably because he had never seen such a shameless person before. He said, "Madam, your daughter and other students have been bullying other students for a long time. They were wrong first. Do you mean that your daughter can bully others, but others can't touch your daughter? What kind of bandit logic was this?" The woman looked arrogant. "Who said that my daughter bullied her? Did my daughter admit it herself? Did any of you see it? This little bastard said it herself. Who can believe her words? She was very sure in her heart. Anyway, as long as she didn't admit it, who could prove that what Zhou Qi said was true?" She secretly pinched her daughter, who was in a daze. Zhang Qin felt the pain and immediately reacted. She said loudly, "Yes. Zhou Qi framed me. I didn't hit her or bully her. Who knows how she got the injury on her body? Anyway, it has nothing to do with me." Gu Xingyin looked at her in surprise. Sure enough, the kind of family raised the kind of child. Zhang Qin being like this was really completely raised astray. However, her mother looked proud. Did you hear that? Our Qin didn't bully others. On the contrary, this little bastard locked my daughter in an abandoned house last night. I'm going to sue her. This is illegal. I want her to go to jail. Zhang Qin stood beside her mother and glanced at Gu Xingyin proudly. Lu Hong, the head teacher who had been sitting on the side, also quickly said, yes. Zhou Qi is talking nonsense. Zhang Qin and other students are all well-behaved and studious students. How could they bully their classmates? I think it's obvious that Zhou Qi was beaten outside. In order to blackmail her classmates, she said such words. The reporter had been watching this scene silently from the back. At this moment, when he heard the head teacher say such shameless words, he couldn't tolerate it anymore. He was about to stand up and refute on the spot, but someone was one step faster than him. It was Zhou Qi. Her small figure stood among several adults who were much taller than her. At this moment, she was no longer timid and uneasy. Instead, she was so calm that it was frightening. It was as if he had completely given up on this world. Her clear eyes stared at Lu Hong without blinking. The deathly stillness in her eyes made Lu Hong shiver uncontrollably. Gu Xingyin said slowly, Teacher Lu, God is watching what people do. What kind of life have I been living in the past year? Who caused all these scars on my body? Others might not know, but you should know better than anyone. Lu Hong's heart skipped a beat. She forced herself to keep a straight face as she reprimanded, Student Zhou Qi, you should know your mistake when you've done something wrong. Do you think that you can get away with just making up a few excuses? Let me tell you, you are delusional. Gu Xingyin interrupted her, did you do something wrong? She was too lazy to look at that woman's ugly face. She just pointed at herself and then at her 4 classmates. Which one of you thinks that with my small body, I can knock down the 4 of them and lock them in the abandoned teaching building? Gu Xingyin sneered, if I had this ability, would I have been bullied so badly for more than a year? Chapter 21:48. When she said this, everyone fell silent. In fact, the contrast was quite obvious. The 2 policemen had thought the same thing before. Zhou Qi was just a weak little girl. How could she be so powerful? Taking a step back, if she was really so powerful, would she be bullied like this? No matter how they looked at it, it was just those students who were frightened and then talking nonsense. Zhang Qin screamed, Zhou Qi, don't pretend to be weak. What did you look like when you hit me yesterday? My body still hurts when you touch me. How dare you not admit it? Everyone looked at her lively appearance and rosy cheeks. Girl, can you pay a little attention to your image when you speak or dress up a little? No one will believe you even if you spout nonsense. Realizing that others were looking at her with scrutiny and disbelief, Zhang Qin suddenly came back to her senses. In fact, if she had a brain at this moment, she would think carefully about how to turn the situation around to her advantage in such a disadvantageous situation. However, perhaps Zhang Qin was used to being superior in front of Zhou Qi. When she faced Zhou Qi, she almost never treated her like a normal classmate. Well, in her eyes, Zhou Qi was usually just a trash can to vent negative emotions. How could she treat a trash can seriously? Therefore, when she found out that this trash can had one day bitten her back and put her in a disadvantageous position, Zhang Qin's first reaction was irrational. She rushed up and habitually reached out to greet Gu Xingyin's face. Who asked you to pretend? Zhou Qi, tell me the truth. Did you lock us up yesterday? Do you think you can erase the truth if you don't admit it? I'll beat you to death, you little bastard. Her action was so sudden that even the policeman standing next to Gu Xingyin didn't react. By the time he reacted, Zhang Qin and Zhou Qi were already entangled together. The police separated the 2 without hesitation. At this time, even the parents who wanted to cause trouble looked at Zhang Qin with a strange expression. Even they felt a little embarrassed on their faces. From Zhang Qin's reaction, it was obvious who was the bully and who was the victim. If it wasn't a long-term habit, how could Zhang Qin greet people so skillfully? Who would believe that Zhou Qi alone would be able to defeat Zhang Qin, who had such a strong fighting ability, and 3 other students? The police officer said, "It's obvious that the 4 students were locked up in the abandoned school building. It should be someone else's doing." He looked at Zhang Qin and the other 3 and asked again, "Now that the police are here, you can tell the truth. Who locked you in the teaching building?" Zhang Qin said almost without hesitation, "I said it's that little bastard Zhou Qi. Don't be fooled by her." The policeman frowned and looked at the others. The other 2 girls were smarter than Zhang Qin. At this moment, they seemed to have realized that things had gone beyond their expectations. Many lowered his head and whispered, "I don't know either. I didn't see clearly." As soon as she said this, Zhang Qin looked at her in disbelief. Duo, what are you saying? It's obviously Zhou Qi." Many looked up and said softly, "Zhang Qin, let's not bully him anymore." Chapter 2149. Zhang Qin looked at Duoduo's gentle face. For some reason, she felt a chill in her heart. She turned to look at Lu Yan. Lu Yan looked at Duo and said hesitantly, "I was scared, so I said Zhou Qi's name casually." When He Kai heard what they said, he opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he met his father's cold eyes. He shrank his neck and said slowly, "I don't know who hit me." If his father knew that he was beaten up so badly by a girl, he would be even angrier. At this point, the matter was basically settled. Zhang Qin and the other students bullied Zhou Qi all year round. This time, they were locked up in the abandoned teaching building by unknown people. After they were found, they casually said Zhou Qi's name to take the blame. This matter had nothing to do with Zhou Qi at all. When Zhang Qin's mother heard this, she was very unhappy. But since it was like this, she had nothing to say. She could only say with a cold face, "Since this is a misunderstanding, I'll take my Qin home first. This child was scared last night and kept saying that her body hurt. I have to take her to the hospital for a good checkup." After saying that, she wanted to leave with Zhang Qin. It was the young policeman who shouted from behind, "Wait a minute." He walked forward and said with a serious face, "The results of this matter are not out yet. We naturally have to continue the investigation." This kind of behavior that dared to kidnap and humiliate students in school was actually quite dangerous. Of course, they had to deal with it seriously. Moreover, there was another problem. In addition, regarding Zhou Qi being bullied in school all year round, the school and her parents should give an answer. The young policeman was really distressed. His sister, that delicate little girl, would scream for a long time even if her calf knocked on the table. But the girl in front of him, who was covered in bruises, did not show any expression at all. Did she not feel pain? Of course not. She was used to it. For this kind of thing, he felt that as a policeman, whether it was out of duty or morality, he could not stand by and do nothing. He could imagine that if this matter was ignored, this girl called Zhou Qi would probably have a more miserable life in the future. Answer? Zhang Qin's mother raised her eyelids and sneered, "What a joke. This little bastard said that my Qin hit her. Where's the evidence? How could the police believe her without any evidence? Then our Qin will say that this little bastard hit her." She kept calling him a little bastard, which made the young policeman frown. "Madam, the other party is just a child. Aren't you being too hurtful with your words?" The young policeman had been working for the past few years, and his temper had improved a lot. Otherwise, according to his temper a few years ago, he really wouldn't mind using some means to teach this woman a lesson. It was true that they should respect women and those who were older than them. However, the prerequisite was that the other party was worthy of respect. Zhang Qin's mother raised her eyebrows. "What did I say wrong? Isn't this Zhou Qi just a little bastard without parents?" The young policeman clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles cracked. Instead, it was Gu Xingyin who stepped forward and grabbed his hand. "Big brother, don't be angry," she said softly. Then, he looked at the mother and daughter and said calmly, although I didn't have the upbringing of my parents, my grandmother taught me the etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame since I was young. I always think that this is the most precious treasure in my life." She smiled slightly. Obviously, although Zhang Qin's parents are still around, she didn't learn what she should have learned. Chapter 2150. Well done. Reporter Wang Lu looked at Gu Xingyin with a smile in his eyes. Not only him, but everyone looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. They didn't expect that Zhou Qi, who looked weak and timid, would say such sharp words. Zhang Qin's mother was stunned for a moment before she realized that this girl was scolding her for being uncultured and her daughter for being uneducated. She subconsciously raised her hand again. Gu Xingyin said again, "People like you, except for arrogance and money to cover up your lack of quality, what else do you have?" She retreated to the side of the policeman. "I want to call the police, big brother." She looked at the young policeman. "I want to sue Zhang Qin, Lu Yan, Su Duo, and Ikai in the class for beating and insulting me for a long time, which affected my daily life and physical and mental health." She continued to look at the vice principal and the head teacher in the office. "I want to sue my head teacher, Teacher Lu, for accepting bribes from parents and being indifferent to students being beaten and insulted. It's against the teacher's ethics. I also want to sue Vice Principal Song for having a close relationship with the parents of rich families in the school and private, accepting a lot of bribes, and," she glanced at Lu Hong, whose face was ugly, and the corners of her mouth raised in an unexpected smile. "Cheating in marriage and having an improper relationship with Teacher Lu. What nonsense are you talking about?" The head teacher, Lu Hong, was the first to react. She pointed at Gu Xingyin angrily. "I knew that you were a bad teacher. I thought you were just a little stupid, but I didn't expect your character to be so bad. You dare to frame teachers and elders." Gu Xingyin didn't care. "Teacher, you know best whether it's nonsense or not." Her voice was very clear. "I'm not stupid. I've been holding it in before because I wanted to finish school safely. But now I suddenly understand that it's useless to hold it in like this. Maybe one day I'll go missing or die, and no one will find out. At worst, I won't go to school in number 1 middle school. Anyway, I haven't learned anything this year. If it goes on like this, I don't know if I can survive these 3 years." After saying this, she closed her mouth again and stood quietly behind the young policeman. She was still the quiet and timid Zhou Qi. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, it would have been hard to imagine that the person in front of him and the sharp-tongued girl from before were the same person. "If that's the case, let's go to the police station." The senior policeman quite appreciated Gu Xingyin's attitude. He said to the others in the office, "If this matter was resolved privately by the school and escalated to the police station, the nature of the matter would be much more serious." Anticipating that more things would happen later, the young policeman asked Gu Xingyin to go back first and treat the wound on her forehead. When no one was paying attention, reporter Wang Lu walked out silently. At this moment, his heart was filled with anger. For the first time, when he wanted to break a piece of news, he didn't think about what this piece of news would bring him after it became popular. Instead, he hoped to expose some excessive phenomena to the public. He didn't even have lunch. He rushed straight home and started writing. And Gu Xingyin also returned to her small house. Before half of the afternoon had passed, a message from the police came from the shabby home phone at home. Those families asked to settle it privately with her. Chapter 2151. The behavior of those families was completely within Gu Xingyin's expectations. To put it bluntly, even if Gu Xingyin called the police, they would not be dealt with too harshly in the end. After all, they were all minors. But for those parents, they would definitely be willing to spend some money to settle this matter privately. Otherwise, the criminal record left behind by the police when they were teenagers would become a strong obstacle to their careers in the future. If it were Zhou Qi herself, she would probably agree if the people who had bullied her were willing to apologize and even compensate a large sum of money. But Gu Xingyin had no intention of letting it go so easily. She did not even need to refuse. She just needed to wait patiently. She replied, saying that she did not want to see these people now, and then hung up the phone. Gu Xingyin did not go to school the next day. She lay at home and had a good sleep. Then, in the afternoon, she went to the internet cafe. Although she was a minor, no one in the internet cafe refused to let Gu Xingyin use the computer. They even provided her with a fake ID number. Gu Xingyin came here for only one purpose. She logged into a certain website. Then, as expected, she saw news about herself on a certain page. It was not only on this page. The reporter knew how to make use of the media. He posted what she wrote and the edited video she took on her Weibo. Hashtag how much damage can school violence cause to a child? Hashtag Gu Xingyin clicked on the video and watched it. The reporter was very moral. He had blurred out everyone's faces, but the dialogue between the characters was clear. The video was not short. It was about half an hour long. After she finished watching all the content, she found that there were thousands of comments and reposts under this Weibo post in half an hour. There were all kinds of comments below frowny face I'm tearing up. That little girl is so pitiful. Which school is this? I want to report the head teacher called Teacher Lu. She casually threw things at a student's face. Although the little girl's face is blurred out, the blood is still very clear, okay? Can the netizens find out which school this is? I will never send my child there again. Fuck, even a 30-year-old man like me is crying. What the fuck, which stupid school is this? If I had a girl who was treated like this, would tear those people apart. Nowadays, the education of some families is really worrying. Judging from the words and actions of those parents, the fact that the children are being taught like this is definitely related to their parents. Reporter Wang Lu, can you give me your contact information in private? I can adopt her. When I was in junior high school, I was also isolated, ostracized, and bullied by my class. Although I transferred schools later and everything changed for the better, I still feel sad when I think of those things. I feel sorry for this girl. I'm also one of the victims of school violence. I developed social phobia during puberty, and now that I've become a freelancer, it's inseparable from the opportunity back then. Even now, I still feel scared when I see strangers. I know which school this is. It's B City First High School. The teacher Lu in the video is the head teacher of grade 11 class 5. The difference in treatment of the students is obvious. The students who give her gifts from good families, such as the few who hit people in the video, are all her beloved soldiers. Chapter 2152. Upstairs, are you an insider? Don't go, please tell me more. Upstairs, insider, don't go +1, number 1 middle school in B City? I just checked, a key high school in the country? Huh, such a trashy teacher should be fired and banned from teaching for the rest of her life. She's simply a scourge to students. Gu Xingyin scrolled down and saw all kinds of comments. Of course, towards the end, this Weibo post became more of a channel for a former victim of school violence to vent. Usually, no one would notice, but when this post was posted, the replies below made countless passers-by sad and angry. And the school in the video was also completely exposed by the sharp-eyed netizens. Many netizens who claimed to be insiders revealed some insider information about this key high school in the country, as well as the outrageous teacher Lu. Perhaps Lu Hong's actions were too infuriating, but in less than an hour, her name, phone number, and even daily life photos were exposed. Gu Xingyin could imagine that Lu Hong would be very busy these few days looking at this degree of enthusiasm. By the time she logged out, this Weibo post had already been pushed to the top of the hot list. At this point, even if the school wanted to suppress it, it couldn't. When she returned home, the phone at home was ringing non-stop. She picked it up. Hello? On the other end of the phone was the homeroom teacher, Lu Hong. She spoke to Gu Xingyin in a gentle tone that she had never heard before. Zhou Qi, I thought about it over and over again last night and felt that I had been negligent in the past. I thought that Zhang Qin and the others were all good students and that it was just a simple misunderstanding with you. I didn't expect that you were really bullied. Gu Xingyin replied with a faint oh. Teacher, you don't have to explain to me, listen to me, The other party interrupted Gu Shengyin. She continued to speak to Gu Shengyin in a gentle tone. I know that you have been wronged in the past. So, I contacted a few parents today and scolded them. I also told them that they must teach their children well. After the teacher negotiated with them, the 4 families agreed to give you 10,000 yuan each as compensation. In addition, teacher will also take out 5,000 yuan as compensation for you. Gu Shengyin did not respond. Lu Hong was a little anxious. Hello? Zhou Qi, why aren't you saying anything? I spent a lot of effort to get this for you. Gu Shengyin sneered in her heart and said, I don't want money. What do I need money for? I just want those who hurt and bullied me to be punished. On the other side of the phone, Lu Hong frowned. Actually, those families didn't come looking for her. She was scared when she saw the news about herself on Weibo. She called the police station and learned that the 4 families were willing to pay 50,000 yuan each to settle with Zhou Qi in private. She felt that this was a good opportunity, so she took over this matter without hesitation. However, in her mouth, the 50,000 yuan each became 10,000 yuan. In Lu Hong's heart, Zhou Qi was a poor child who had lost her parents since she was young. How could she have seen money? 40,000 was definitely a huge sum of money in her eyes. She couldn't possibly refuse. When the time came, she would settle the matter here and put down more than 100,000 yuan. Those families would definitely thank her later. Unfortunately, no matter how good she was, the other party simply didn't care about her. Chapter 2153. Lu Hong suddenly became anxious. She thought that Gu Shengyin didn't like the money and secretly blamed herself for deducting so much. She frowned and said, Zhou Qi, why don't you want to? These tens of thousands of yuan can make your life much better. Of course, if you think it's too little, I can talk to the parents of those students. There's no need. Gu Shengyin felt disgusted when she thought of this woman's hypocritical face. She said directly, I don't want any money. Teacher Lu, you don't have to waste your energy. I'll make it clear that I don't want money. I just want those who bullied me to get what they deserve. After she finished speaking, she hung up the phone with a bang. However, just as she hung up, the phone rang again. Gu Shengyin picked it up. It was from the police station. Zhou Qi, the guardians of the other parties said that they want to meet you in person to discuss the solution to this matter. On the other side of the phone was the young policeman who had been taking care of Gu Shengyin. He said this in a more tactful way. In fact, the parents' intentions were very obvious. They wanted to compensate and settle it privately. There was only one purpose, and that was to not implicate the children. In fact, at first, Zhang Qin's mother was not even willing to compensate, but later, when she saw that the public opinion on Weibo was too strong, she had no choice but to relent. The young policeman did not want Gu Shengyin to settle it privately. Even if he was just a bystander, he felt sorry for the girl. He felt that what those students did was really too much. Such behavior should not be forgiven. If Zhou Qi chose to settle it privately, then the bullying and humiliation she had suffered before would seem insignificant and could be bought with money. However, the young policeman knew more about Gu Shengyin's actual situation. After a deeper investigation of Zhou Qi, he finally understood what kind of life this girl had been living in the past few years. For other families, 200,000 yuan might only be the icing on the cake, but for Zhou Qi, it was enough to support her to live a carefree life until she went to university. Therefore, he didn't say anything and just waited quietly for Gu Shengyin to make her own choice. No matter what she chose, he planned to do his best to help this girl fight for the greatest benefits. Gu Shengyin didn't even have time to think. She answered directly, I don't want to see them, and I have no intention of settling it in private. Big brother, I don't want money, but I want the people who bullied me to get the punishment they deserve. I know that my situation has been exposed on the internet. Now, many people are paying attention to this matter. What happened to me was definitely not an isolated case. Although I can't help much, at the very least, I want to let those students who bully others for fun know that it's not like there's no one who can control them. And it's not like they can trample on others without punishment just because they're underage. At this moment, the young policeman suddenly felt his eyes sting. He blinked hard and revealed a smile. I know what you mean, and I will also convey this to the other parties involved. You can rest at home for a few days. Don't worry, I will ask someone to find some connections and help you transfer to another school. After such a thing happened, no matter what, Zhou probably couldn't stay in B City No. 1 middle school anymore. Chapter 2154. Gu Xingyin declined and said that there was no need. After thanking the young policeman, he hung up the phone in confusion. She had to change schools. However, this matter had already been brought up by someone else. The atmosphere in the Chen family was very solemn. In the spacious hall, the hale and hearty old Madame Chen and her dignified eldest son were all sitting upright on the chairs. Ji Yu sat calmly on the chair. His siblings, who lived outside all year round and had their own families, also had solemn expressions. Old Madame Chen glanced at her son, daughter-in-law, and grandson. Finally, her gaze fell on her youngest grandson. A trace of gentleness flashed across her stern expression. So, you all had the same dream last night? The dream that old Madame Chen was talking about was the reason why the whole family was finally able to sit together. It turned out that everyone in the Chen family had the same dream last night. That dream was very mysterious. The general idea was that the youngest son of the Chen family, Chen Shiza, was born weak with a congenital illness from his mother's womb. According to his physical condition, he would not live past the age of 25. However, there was a slight chance that he would meet his benefactor when he was 18 years old. And that benefactor, if only one person had such a dream, then it could be explained that it was a dream because he wanted Chen Shiza's body to get better. However, when the whole family had the same dream, it was very mysterious. Old Madame Chen was a firm believer in Buddhism. At first, when she woke up in the morning, she thought that it must be the guidance of Bodhisattva. Therefore, early in the morning, she called her son and daughter-in-law to come over. However, when she heard that the whole family had the same dream, old Madame Chen was even more certain of her thoughts. We have to find this benefactor, she said solemnly. Chen Shiza was the lifeblood of the family. Everyone in the family hoped that he could live healthily until he was old. Even Father Chen, who had never believed in such supernatural things, didn't object after frowning for a moment. After all, he was his son. What if it really came true? Seeing that no one had any objections, old Madame Chen began to talk about how to find the person in the dream. At this time, Ji Yu suddenly said, "Grandma, I know where she is." Whoosh! Everyone's eyes fell on him. Ji Yu's expression did not change. I also had a similar dream, but I know a little more than you. Old Madame Chen's face was filled with joy. That's for the best. It seems that person is indeed our Shiza's benefactor. Ji Yu smiled and thought to herself, she's not only my benefactor, but also your future granddaughter-in-law. He stood up and said, I'll pick her up myself. Old Madame Chen asked her eldest grandson to go with her, but Ji Yu refused. He was going to bring his lover home. He didn't want anyone else to go with him. Thus, when Gu Xingyin woke up from her afternoon nap, she found that there was one more person beside her bed. Perhaps because she was too familiar with his aura, she actually didn't notice it. Ji Yu smiled and looked at her. Ah, Yin, I'm here to take you home. Gu Xingyin sat up from the bed in a daze. Before she could sort out her thoughts, she subconsciously replied, okay. She believed that this man, no matter what, would arrange everything properly. Ji Yu sensed her inner thoughts and couldn't help but rub the top of her head. The corners of her lips curled up into a smile. Chapter 2155. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses. She shook her head and cleared the last trace of hazy pajamas in her mind. She looked at Ji Yu with an inquiring gaze. Ji Yu held her hand and sent some information into her mind. Gu Xingyin, who knew what he had done, couldn't help but laugh. She didn't expect that her lover would use such a method to solve her problem. Ji Yu looked at her smile and said, there are many ways to make the Chen family accept you. But from the looks of it, there isn't any method that is faster and more effective than this. In this world, although most people didn't believe in gods and Buddhas, that unknown mysterious power was still the most revered. Especially the Qin family's most senior and most powerful person, the old madam, was an extremely devout Buddhist. It was also because of this that the progress of this matter was so smooth. Jiyu glanced at the small old room and pulled Gu Xingyin up. "Come back with me today." Gu Xingyin didn't refuse. She didn't even bring anything and followed Jiyu to the Qin family alone. Everyone in the Qin family was waiting at home. Jiyu insisted on going alone to find the girl. They had no choice but to let him go. Of course, there was another aspect. They also wanted to see if this dream was really as miraculous as it seemed. In this world, did the girl they saw in their dreams really exist? Then, they saw their grandson, son, and younger brother, who couldn't have any intense emotions because of his body, who had been indifferent to everyone since he was young, carefully holding a girl's hand and bringing her in with extreme gentleness. As a mother, Mother Qin knew her son the best. She could tell at a glance that her son cared about this strange girl. While she was surprised, a subtle jealousy rose in her heart. This stinky boy. He had never been so close to me. However, when Gu Xingyin raised his head, her previous emotions disappeared in an instant, and were replaced by shock. It was actually real. This girl wearing a washed-out school uniform looked exactly the same as the noble person in the dream. The masters of the Qin family looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. "Grandma, I've brought Zhou Qi back." Jiyu greeted. "Zhou Qi, eh?" The eldest daughter of the Qin family, Qin Shilu, who was sitting on the left, suddenly exclaimed in surprise. She suddenly stood up and walked over to Gu Xingyin in surprise. Looking at her carefully, Qin Shilu's gaze paused on the scar on her forehead. "Zhou Qi, are you studying in No. 1 middle school?" she asked. Gu Xingyin nodded. She knew in her heart that Jiyu's sister in this life had probably seen the Weibo post about her. Sure enough, after hearing her affirmative answer, Qin Shilu's expression instantly became much gentler. She even smiled and said gently, "I'm Qin Shi's elder sister. You can also call me elder sister." Gu Xingyin and Jiyu were fine, but the rest of the Qin family looked at Qin Shilu in surprise. This powerful woman in the business world was usually not an easy character to get along with. Why did she suddenly become so easy to talk to in front of such a little girl? Jiyu answered this question on behalf of his sister. "Zhou Qi has no relatives at home. I plan to let her live in the Qin family and go to school with me." Chapter 2156. This trip to the Chen's house was unexpectedly smooth. No one in the Chen's objected to Jiyu's suggestion. Gu Xingyin followed Jiyu home in the afternoon. At night, there was an extra room for her in the Chen's house. She took the most comfortable bath since she came to this world. She opened the wardrobe and found that it was full of clothes in her size. There were even private clothes. She smiled. Sure enough, this kind of rich family was very efficient and watertight in everything they did. She casually chose an outfit and put it on. Someone knocked on the door. Gu Xingyin said, "Come in," and Jiyu walked in. He saw Gu Xingyin's forehead at first glance. Zhou Qi's skin was very white. It was not the healthy kind of white, but more like a kind of sickly pale. Her eyebrows and eyes were very dark. Such a strong contrast often made people remember her at a glance. Speaking of which, Zhang Qin and others liked to bully her. In addition to the fact that no one in her family could help her, there was also a very important reason. That was the jealousy between girls. Zhou Qi did not have beautiful and fashionable dresses like them, nor did she put on light makeup to enhance her appearance. Zhou Qi did not even have the energy to pay attention to her own clothes. She did not even have the most basic necessities, so how could she have the time to study these things? However, even so, Zhou Qi's natural face was much more beautiful than Zhang Qin and others. How could they be convinced? However, at this time, Jiyu was not paying attention to Gu Xingyin's appearance. He frowned and stared at the wound on her forehead. He could not help but reach out and touch it gently. "Does it hurt?" he asked. Gu Xingyin shook her head and said honestly, I blocked the pain. Jiyu asked her to sit down and took out the medicine box from the cabinet. Even so, you have to apply medicine. Gu Xingyin sat obediently and did not refute. She let Jiyu apply the medicine for her, and the two of them went downstairs together. Gu Xingyin sensed that the Qin family members were looking at her with much gentler and more intimate eyes than when she had just arrived in the afternoon. She knew the reason. For a family like the Qin family, no matter how much they believed in some mysterious power, if they wanted to adopt a stranger, they would definitely investigate the person's family background and character thoroughly. With the power of the Qin family, it was not difficult for them to investigate Zhou Qi's past in just one afternoon. Then, they naturally knew what kind of life Zhou Qi had been living all these years. Then, at this moment, they should be feeling pity for him. He pitied an underage girl for having such an experience. Madame Chen looked at Gu Xingyin and smiled. She waved her hand and signaled for Gu Xingyin to come to her side. She took Gu Xingyin's hand and said, It turns out that you are such a beautiful girl, but you are a little thin. Madame Chen also looked at Gu Xingyin gently and said, It's okay. Take good care of her and our family in the future. In just one day, the matter of Gu Xingyin being adopted by the Qin family was settled. Although a family like the Qin family did not meet the conditions to adopt a child, there was nothing in the world that could not be solved by power. If there was, it only meant that one's power was not enough. At least with the power of the Qin family, it was not difficult to transfer Zhou Qi's household registration, adopt her, and make her completely cut off from her past. Chapter 2157. On the other side, Zhang Qin and several other families were extremely anxious. Now the public opinion on the internet was getting more and more intense. The resourceful netizens had even dug out the origins of their families. The Weibo post posted by reporter Wang Lu had been on the hot search list for many days, and the comments below had exceeded 100,000. When Zhang Qin's mother went to work today, she was even called to the office by the leader to ask if the person in the video was her. The leader's expression was very subtle at that time. Zhang Qin's mother had a bad feeling in her heart. Not only them, but number 1 middle school was also under a lot of pressure now. Many parents of students called the school and asked how the school should deal with the content in the online video. There were even parents who were more direct and directly said that they were worried about their children studying in such a school and wanted to find connections to transfer to another school. The principal of number 1 middle school was furious in the meeting room. Lu Hong was his niece. Because of this relationship, he usually took care of Lu Hong. The leaders in the school were also very polite to this young female teacher. The principal had heard some rumors about Lu Hong, but he had always felt that this kind of small matter was not a big deal and that he could suppress it. However, he never expected that the other party would create such a big trouble for him. At this moment, not to mention the principal of number 1 middle school, even the director of City B's Education Bureau could not suppress this matter without coming up with a result. He was ready to remove Lu Hong from her position in number 1 middle school. At this time, if he did not take any measures, the entire number 1 middle school would be dragged down. At that time, as the principal of number 1 middle school, how could he get away with it? However, before he could do anything, someone acted faster than him. The netizens thought that this was the end of it. Unexpectedly, that night, another interview video was spread on the internet. It was exposed by reporter Wang Lu. After the previous video, many netizens followed the account of reporter Wang Lu, looking forward to more follow-up of this matter. Therefore, when Wang Lu exposed another video that night, many netizens clicked to watch it immediately. This time, the video was very long, almost an hour long. Usually, netizens would not be interested in watching such a long video. But this time was different. This video was made up of countless small interview videos. The producer was obviously very careful. Not only did he pixelate the faces of the interviewees, but he also blurred their voices. Only the uniform of number 1 middle school could prove their identity. In total, he interviewed more than 20 people. Each person was interviewed for 1 minute, and the longest was more than 3 minutes. The information revealed was shocking. I know. The video is real. Zhou Qi is in our class and has always been bullied by some people in the class. The rest of us don't even dare to get close to her because we're afraid that we'll be isolated like that. Mr. Liu has accepted many gifts from Zhang Qin's family. Everyone in our class knows that. No one dares to offend Zhang Qin, not even the class monitor. I don't know their class well, but I heard from my classmates that Laoshi Liu is a relative of the principal. He has a powerful background. Zhou Qi and I are in the same class. She's really pitiful. I met her a few times in the cafeteria. Every time, she would get a bowl of plain white rice and eat it with pickled vegetables or chili sauce. Sometimes, she would just eat plain white steamed buns. I heard that she had no relatives at home. I wanted to give her some money, but Zhang Qin and the others hated her. I didn't dare to offend her. Chapter 2158. At the end of the video was the reporter Wang Lu's face. He said, "I've seen Zhou Qi with my own eyes and experienced the scene in the video. What I regret most at the moment is that when she was bullied, I was hesitant. I was afraid that I couldn't record the video after I was exposed. I became a qualified reporter, but I felt uneasy on my conscience. If she can see this video, I'll apologize to her. Those two police officers are good." After the video was exposed, there were still some voices of doubt on the internet, suspecting that it was a publicity stunt. But after this video came out, those people fell silent. In the video, the students of No. 1 Middle School used their own experiences to prove that these things were true. In the principal's office of No. 1 Middle School, the principal was most concerned about the trouble caused by Lu Hong in the past 2 days. Yesterday, he found Lu Hong and scolded her, saying that he couldn't protect her for doing such a stupid thing. He would hold a meeting at school as soon as possible and make a statement to expel her. However, after watching the newly released video, the principal had a bad feeling in his heart. Perhaps this was no longer a matter that could be solved by punishing Lu Hong. Soon, he received a call from his cousin, who worked in the education bureau. On the phone, his cousin scolded him and then said angrily, "I can't take responsibility for this matter. It's up to you." The principal of No. 1 Middle School was a figure that everyone flattered in school. When had he ever been scolded like this? He scolded his cousin in his heart. He usually didn't hesitate to accept his gifts, but when something really happened, he was unreliable at all. But even though he was angry, he knew that he still had to rely on his cousin at this time. He suppressed the anger in his heart and continued to call, but this time, the other party obviously didn't intend to intervene and didn't answer his call at all. The principal of No. 1 Middle School was very angry. His connections here couldn't help, and on the other side, the key person in this matter, the student named Zhou Qi, couldn't be contacted either. Zhou Qi didn't come to school again after that incident. After the incident, the school contacted Zhou Qi, but she didn't answer the phone. The teacher went to her house to find her, but it was in vain. Thinking about it, it was strange. She was a girl with no parents and no relatives. Where could she hide? When he asked the police gave him an answer. The other party had been adopted and was living a good life. But which one are you asking? Sorry, this is a private matter. Damn it. With all kinds of troubles coming together, the principal of No. 1 High School, who boasted that he had a good rest, could not help but curse and kick the table in front of him. In fact, he didn't know that it wasn't that his cousin didn't want to care about him, but that he couldn't. Not long ago, he received a call from his superiors. The people inside said very clearly that the school violence this time had caused quite a bad impact. Not only were the people very concerned, but even the leaders were quite angry. There were even higher-ups who directly pressured them, saying that such a phenomenon must be severely punished. The director of the Education Bureau was already thinking about how to deal with this matter to appease the angry leaders and the public. Who would care about a mere principal and form teacher? Chapter 2159. It was also at this time that the parents of the students who had been acting high and mighty before completely panicked. It was as if in just one night, everyone knew what their child had done. Relatives, friends, and even neighbors were sizing them up intentionally or unintentionally when they went out. There was no good intention in those eyes. The most scared were Zhang Qin and the other students. Because of this incident, they didn't go to class for a few days. Perhaps this was a good thing for them because when Zhang Qin went out to buy snacks, there were people sizing her up and pointing at her behind, scaring Zhang Qin to death. The parents began to frequently contact the school and the police. They lowered their stance and only hoped that this incident would pass quickly. However, at this time, the school itself was already in a terrible state. They all knew that it was best to contact Gu Xingyin, the person involved. As long as Gu Xingyin publicly expressed that she accepted the apology of the school and the other families involved, then there was still room for negotiation. However, it was this key person who couldn't be found. Gu Xingyin was currently in the Qin family's house, talking to Mother Qin about transferring schools. What I mean is, you were delayed in first middle school, so I used an old friend's relationship to transfer you to Zhangya Middle School. After the summer vacation, you can re-enter the first year of high school. How about it? Zhangya Middle School was one of the best high schools in B City, and it was also Qin Shiza's high school. Obviously, the Qin family was really thinking for her. Gu Xingyin naturally didn't have any objections to this kind of thing. Oh right. After Mother Qin finished talking with Gu Xingyin, she talked about another matter. Your experience was exposed on the internet, and now it's causing a stir. The parents of the students who bullied you are looking for you everywhere. I want to ask your opinion. Mother Qin looked at Gu Xingyin inquisitively. She was also curious about what this girl would do. Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "If I don't forgive them, will Lu Hong be expelled? Will those students get the punishment they deserve?" Mother Qin nodded. Of course. Gu Xingyin smiled, her big eyes filled with joy. Then why should I forgive them? Mother Qin was stunned for a moment and then said, "But they are now being cursed by thousands of people. They even have to be careful when they go out, lest they are recognized and beaten up by the netizens who are paying attention to this matter." Now that they knew they were wrong, they swore that they would change in the future. Don't you think they are very pitiful? Gu Xingyin only said, "When I was beaten up by those people, locked in a dark room for an entire night, and tore up my homework for more than 2 hours, why didn't they pity me?" Mother Qin looked at the girl's thin but determined side profile and suddenly revealed a smile. She reached out to stroke Gu Xingyin's hair and said softly, "I know. Don't worry, your Uncle Qin will help you settle this matter. It's impossible for those people to suppress it. Don't think too much, take good care of your body and wait for the next semester to go to school with our Shiza." Qin Shiza was in his 3rd year next semester, and Gu Xingyin was in her 1st year. The two of them were in the same school, so it was just right for them to go to school together. Mother Qin walked downstairs, looked at her husband sitting on the sofa, and said, "This child has a good temperament. She has her own ideas." Chapter 2160. Her conversation with Zhou Qi just now was most likely a deliberate test. Mother Qin and her husband both felt that Zhou Qi had suffered too much before, and those who had hurt her deserved the punishment they deserved. However, they were also afraid that this child was too weak to be helped. That was why Mother Qin said those words. If Gu Xingyin chose to forgive them, then Mother Qin would also promise her not to pursue the matter with those families. But after that, they would only treat her as a child raised by their family for charity. When she became an adult, they would casually arrange for her to do something in their company or at home, and that would be considered as doing their best. People who were indecisive and didn't have a firm stance weren't worthy of their devotion. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin's answer didn't disappoint them. Father Qin nodded and said, "In that case, I won't hold back." The Qin family's intervention was the final driving force behind the final conclusion of this matter. This time, the punishment of the B City's Education Bureau caught the attention of the entire country. The principal of No. 1 Middle School was dismissed because of lax discipline. The dean related to this matter was dismissed. Another group of leaders of No. 1 Middle School were also affected because of this matter, but the punishment was less severe. The person directly involved, Lu Hong, was dismissed and stripped of her teaching license. This was only the punishment of the Education Bureau. The court also came out with the results. Compared to the Education Bureau, the court sentence was relatively light. After all, Those students were underage and didn't cause any serious harm to Zhou Qi. As for those students, they were only detained for a few days and given some reform education. Each family also compensated the victim, Zhou Qi, for some physical and mental damages. After the results came out, the majority of netizens were very dissatisfied. However, there was no result to their dissatisfaction. Regarding school violence, this country currently didn't have a more complete system and regulations. After the results came out, perhaps some people could cover it up, but the popularity of this matter slowly died down. The people were always forgetful, especially when it had nothing to do with them. A few days ago, they were still filled with righteous indignation over something, but in the blink of an eye, they put it behind them and focused their attention and passion on other things. However, for Zhang Qin and the other families, this matter was far from over. Other than Hikai's family, who ran their own business, the parents of the other three families all received dismissal letters from their companies. The other party made it very clear that the impact of this incident was too bad. If they continued to stay in the company, it would not be good for the company's image. When it rains, it pours. After the parents lost their jobs, the first thing the newly appointed principal of No. 1 high school did was to expel Zhang Qin and the other three from school. This principal was a former vice principal of the school. He was very upright and plain-spoken, and had always been at odds with the principal. He had been suppressed by the principal all these years. Now that he had risen to the top, his actions were naturally bigger. All of a sudden, the entire No. 1 middle school became much more standardized. As for Zhang Qin and the others who had been expelled, no school was willing to accept them even if they wanted to transfer. At least in B City, no high school was willing to accept such students who had appeared in front of the entire nation. Left with no choice, they could only choose to go to another city. She couldn't possibly not go to school. At this moment, they hadn't thought about the future. 2 years later, no matter how outstanding their results were, those famous schools with hundreds of years of history wouldn't accept a student with a flawed character. Chapter 2161. Gu Xingyin didn't lack the compensation money, but she didn't refuse it. This was what Zhou Qi deserved. At this point, the matter was considered to have come to an end. The Chens seemed to believe in their dream very much. In addition, Gu Xingyin's expressions showed that she had a good temper and a good personality. Her experience was also very lovable. The Chens had a good impression of this girl. Mrs. Chen even asked the family's chef to make all kinds of nourishing soups for Gu Xingyin. Mrs. Chen was afraid that Gu Xingyin couldn't keep up with Zhang Ye's learning progress, so she specially hired a famous teacher to tutor Gu Xingyin at home. In fact, Gu Xingyin didn't need this at all. However, Zhou Qi's previous experience and achievements were obvious. If she acted like she knew everything, it would be really wrong. Therefore, the tutor, who was not very happy at first, but was unwilling to come because of the high remuneration offered by the Chen family, was shocked by Gu Xingyin in less than a day after meeting her. This child simply had an extremely intelligent brain. She could understand any kind of question with just a hint. He didn't understand why when she invited him over, Mrs. Chen said that this child's foundation wasn't good and she might be slow to react. She also asked him to be more patient when teaching her. However, her foundation was indeed not very good. No, it wasn't that she didn't learn the foundation well. Looking at this girl's state, it was more like she had never been exposed to this kind of knowledge at all. He asked the question in his heart. Gu Xingyin told him the truth. In the past 2 semesters, she hadn't seriously attended a single class at all. This was because all her textbooks had been torn away, and she was sitting in the corner of the classroom. She was thin and small, so she couldn't see the teacher at the podium at all. When the tutor heard this, he lamented that such a good seedling was almost ruined by such an irresponsible teacher. From then on, he taught Gu Xingyin more attentively. Gu Xingyin naturally responded to his kindness with a beautiful answer. Mrs. Chen clicked her tongue in wonder when she heard the teacher's feedback. She said that she was supporting her family. Ji Yu sat at the side and said with a smile, she was originally a very outstanding girl. It was her previous school that held her back. Mrs. Chen looked at her youngest son who was smiling gently. She felt that his attitude was a little strange. However, she didn't think too much about it and only suppressed this thought. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. During this period of time, Gu Xingyin had finally put on some weight under the careful care of the Qin family's chef. She had also become much fairer and taller. Her previously long black hair had also been meticulously combed into a neat short hairstyle. Her delicate facial features were highlighted, and she looked full of youthful energy, natural and unrestrained. This is what a 16-year-old girl should be like. If it were the former students of No. 1 middle school, they would never believe that this was the same Zhou Qi who always avoided people. The Qin family's attitude towards Gu Xingyin had also become more and more cordial. As for the reason, more than 3 months had passed since this girl came to the Qin family. Qin Shi's illness didn't act up even once, and he looked more and more energetic. When they went to the hospital for a checkup, the result was that Qin Shi's current condition was very good. If he could maintain this condition for a long time, his illness might not have a big impact on his lifespan. Chapter 2162. The entire Qin family, except for Jiyu, looked at Gu Xingyin as if they were looking at a savior. Sure enough, it was the Bodhisattva who made Shiza meet his destined benefactor. Every time Gu Xingyin and Jiyu talked about this, they felt it was funny. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. After the college entrance examination, Gu Xingyin became the top scorer of the college entrance examination in B City with absolutely excellent results. The Qin family was very happy. 3 years ago, their Shiza was the top scorer of the college entrance examination in B City. They didn't expect that 2 years later, their Qin family had another top scorer. You said Zhou Qi was an outsider? The Qin family didn't admit it. In these 3 years, the Qin family had really regarded Gu Xingyin as a real family member. The Qin family's teacher appreciation banquet was held in a very high-end hotel in B City. At the banquet, Gu Xingyin became the absolute protagonist. Even the class teacher, who had always been strict, had a smile on her face. Gu Xingyin drank a few more glasses and felt a little dizzy. She got up and went to the bathroom to tidy herself up. When she went out, she saw a person. The young girl had gorgeous makeup on her face. Her hair was permed into a golden color. She was wearing a deep V-neck black close-fitting dress and a pair of pointy stilettos that were at least 10 centimeters high. She was full of the smell of the wind. She and Gu Xingyin looked at each other. Obviously, they didn't recognize her and walked past her casually. Gu Xingyin stood quietly and watched from afar as she walked to a middle-aged man with a big belly and held his hand intimately. Gu Xingyin saw very clearly that the middle-aged man with an oily face, who was old enough to be her father, pinched her perky buttocks unceremoniously. The girl just smiled coquettishly and didn't have any other reaction. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and sneered softly. Back then, Zhang Qin's family was a middle-class family with a good social status. She actually fell to this point. Things were unpredictable. However, those people and those matters had nothing to do with her now. She splashed some cold water on her face to wake herself up and walked out again. At the entrance of the hotel, Zhang Qin seemed a little absent-minded. She thought of the girl she had seen in the washroom. The girl didn't look old. Her skin was fair, her facial features were delicate, and her eyes were bright and spirited. She had a youthful aura that was well protected by her family. However, she felt that the other party looked a little familiar. But when he thought about the people he knew, if he had really seen someone with such an outstanding appearance, how could he forget? She frowned and pondered. Suddenly, an impatient shout came from the front. The man who had just gone to drive the car was calling her. Zhang Qin hurriedly responded. She grabbed her bag tightly with one hand and suppressed the disgust in her heart. She quickly walked up with a sweet smile. The moment she walked out of the hotel, she subconsciously turned back to look. On the huge LED screen at the entrance of the hotel, a line of glaring red words stung her eyes. Congratulations to Zhou Qi for becoming the top scorer of the college entrance examination in B City. Zhou Qi. Zhou Qi. Zhang Qin only felt a flash of inspiration in her mind. The face she saw in the washroom just now instantly connected with the face in the depths of her memory. Although it looked like a big change, as long as one looked carefully, one could still see that her facial features hadn't changed much. She looked at the electronic screen in a daze. The man's impatient shout rang in her ears again. Suddenly, she burst into tears. Today's update. Gao Lingji had always felt that living 10,000 times better than the enemy was the greatest revenge against her. Yes, everyone still has recommendation votes. Vote for Gao Lingji's new book. The old book is almost finished, so there's no need to boost its popularity. The new book needs more care. Moi. Chapter 2163. Back home. Gu Xingyin drank a little too much, so she went back to her room to rest after informing her family. You didn't leave. He looked at his parents, who seemed to be in a good mood, and took the initiative to start a topic. Dad, Mom, I have something to tell you. The Qin couple looked at each other and nodded. Jiyu went straight to the point. I like Zhou Qi. I will be with her and marry her in the future. He didn't mean that he wanted to be with her, but that he would. He had even thought about their future. The Qin family's parents didn't show much surprise, as if this was something they had expected. In fact, it was obvious that since Zhou Qi came, their youngest son, who had always been indifferent and otherworldly, suddenly became a little more lively, and even smiled more often. Especially during the holidays, the two of them were almost always together. If they couldn't tell, how could they have the nerve to call themselves parents? Everyone in the Qin family was quite satisfied with Zhou Qi. She was sensible, beautiful, and had a good reputation when it came to dealing with people. Of course, more importantly, she was really their youngest son's benefactor. Over the years, Jiyu went to the hospital regularly for checkups, and the results were getting better and better. The specialist who had been in charge of Qin Shiza's health since he was a child said bluntly that it was a miracle. According to Qin Shiza's current physical condition, although there was no way to cure his congenital disease, it could be controlled so that he wouldn't have an attack for the rest of his life. This alone was enough for all the Qin family members to treat Gu Xingyin differently. Mrs. Qin said directly, as elders, we won't interfere in the affairs of you young people. Dad and Mom only have one request. First of all, Chi-Chi must be willing to be with you. Second, if you really are with her, you have to treat her well. Needless to say, Jiyu could only dote on his lover. In fact, he came today just to inform the parents of this body. If they didn't agree, Jiyu had countless ways to make them agree. Jiyu waited for Gu Xingyin for 4 years. At Gu Xingyin's graduation party, Jiyu proposed to Gu Xingyin, who was speaking on the podium as an outstanding graduate, in front of all the teachers and students. This kind of thing was not rare, but every time it happened, it was so beautiful that it made people yearn for it. I love you, are you willing to spend the rest of your life with me? Gu Xingyin smiled at the man in front of her and reached out her hand. I am willing. At the same time, her voice sounded in Jiyu's mind. I'm willing to walk with you until the end of time. Jiyu also smiled and reached out to hug the person beside her. Silly, to us, time is endless. We will truly be together forever. The two of them lived a loving life in this world. When the two aged bodies could no longer hold on and were about to die, Jiyu suddenly grabbed Gu Xingyin's hand. In the next world, follow me. I want to give you a gift. Gu Xingyin was a little confused, but she didn't ask anything. She just smiled and said, okay. The two old people on the bed held hands and stopped breathing. At the same time, 2 rays of light that ordinary people couldn't see flew out from the two bodies and disappeared into the void. Chapter 2164. This time, the two of them did not separate. They did not possess anyone. After Gu Xingyin opened her eyes, she saw the man in green holding her hand. This is one of my incarnations, Jiyu said. His original body still could not come here. Gu Xingyin looked up at his side. Everywhere was gray. There was nothing in sight. There were no living creatures, no plants, no sound, not even mountains or rivers. This is... A thought flashed through Gu Xingyin's mind. Ji-yu looked at her sideways. Ah, Een, this is your world. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes wide. As soon as Ji-yu finished speaking, the gray mist in front of her suddenly separated. The sky, the earth, and the ground suddenly separated. Gu Xingyin looked at the scene in front of her in shock. Although she had seen it in Ji-yu's memory, it was not as shocking as seeing it with her own eyes. She witnessed the birth of a world. Come. Ji-yu held her hand. The two of them walked in the void as if it was flat ground. What do you want? Ji-yu suddenly asked. Gu Xingyin looked at him in confusion. Ji-yu stretched out his hand and gently pointed at the sky with his fingertip. The sun. A huge golden fireball was born in the sky. The whole world was lit up. Gu Xingyin immediately understood what he meant. She asked excitedly, "Can I do it too?" Ji-yu smiled. "Try it." Gu Xingyin stretched out her hand and gently pointed at the sun. The moon. A cold radiance spread out, and a bright silver moon appeared beside the sun. The sun and moon were high in the sky, shining brilliantly on the sky and the earth. Gu Xingyin looked at this scene in amazement. She could not help but say, "The stars." Following her words, countless tiny light spots appeared in the sky. She was as happy as a child. She slowly looked at the world and said one word after another: white clouds, rivers, mountains. In the end, she spoke faster and faster until she finally closed her eyes. She didn't speak again, but the surrounding environment changed even faster than before. All the appearances and creatures that should exist in a normal world slowly appeared around him. Gu Xingyin's expression became more and more solemn. Ji-yu looked at her with a smile. It seemed that she had finally understood the essence of creation. The sun rose and the moon set, and the stars moved. Gu Xingyin sat with her eyes closed, and Ji-yu stood by her side, watching over her. After an unknown period of time, Gu Xingyin opened his eyes. At this point, the entire world had changed in her eyes. She could hear the sound of flowing water thousands of miles away. She could understand what the wind whispered in her ears. If she wanted to, she could easily know the thoughts of any living creature in this world. In this world, she was the god who controlled everything. How do you feel? Gu Xingyin moved and stood beside Ji-yu. I feel very good. This world is like my child. Ji-yu looked at her gently and said, "So, I made the right choice in giving you this gift. Its name is Saint Origin World. If I love you, I will give you the whole world." This was the world that Ji-yu gave to Gu Xingyin. This was the love that Ji-yu gave to Gu Xingyin.